Every parent knows the weight of wanting to give their child a better life. When you're down to your last $50 and your 9-year-old son keeps asking when you'll find a real home again, you'll take any chance you can get. That's exactly where Michael Carter found himself when he bid on a rotting cabin at a county auction. The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains of their cramped apartment, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Michael sat at the kitchen table, a cup of lukewarm coffee growing cold in his hands as he stared at the empty wallet beside his breakfast plate. Inside that leather billfold, cracked and faded from years of honest work, lay two $20 bills and a 10. $50, the sum total of what remained after rent, groceries, and keeping their 15-year-old Honda running long enough to get him to work and back. Elizabeth's wedding ring sat in a small velvet box next to the wallet, catching the morning light with a gentle gleam that reminded him of her smile. He'd been carrying it with him for 3 months now, unable to bring himself to pawn it, but knowing the time was coming when he'd have no choice. The ring represented everything they'd built together, everything they'd lost when cancer took her 18 months ago, and everything he was failing to provide for their son, Noah. 9-year-old Noah sat across from him, methodically eating his cereal while sketching in a notebook he'd found at a garage sale. The boy had inherited his mother's artistic eye and his father's steady hands, creating elaborate drawings of houses with big yards, tree houses, and rooms where a person could spread out without bumping into walls. He drew what he dreamed of: space permanence, a place that felt like home rather than a temporary stop between disappointments. Mrs. Peterson says some kids at school are going camping this weekend. Real camping with tents and everything. Michael set down his coffee cup, carefully recognizing the careful way his son brought up things they couldn't afford. Noah had learned not to ask directly for things, a survival skill no 9-year-old should need to develop. That sounds like fun, buddy. What kind of camping? The kind where you sleep outside and cook over a fire and don't have to hear Mr. Reynolds upstairs practicing his trumpet at midnight. Noah's pencil moved across the paper, adding windows to a house that looked remarkably like the ones they drove past in the nicer neighborhoods across town. I told her we probably couldn't go because we don't have camping stuff. The weight of those words settled into Michael's chest like a stone. Noah had stopped asking for things months ago, but he hadn't stopped wanting them: the camping trip, the baseball glove he'd admired in the sporting goods store, the bicycle with working brakes that would let him ride safely with the other kids. Noah had learned to transform wishes into quiet observations, protecting his father from the pain of saying no. Michael worked as a mechanic at Davidson's Auto Repair, a job that barely covered their basic expenses, but allowed him the flexibility to pick Noah up from school each day. Frank Davidson was a decent man who understood that single fathers sometimes needed to leave early for parent-teacher conferences or stay home with sick children. The pay wasn't much, but the understanding was worth more than money some days. Their apartment was a study in making do with less. The living room held a second-hand sofa that doubled as Michael's bed, a coffee table made from milk crates and a piece of wood, and a television that worked only if you held the antenna just right. Noah's bedroom was barely large enough for a twin bed and a dresser, but the boy had made it his own with drawings taped to the walls and a collection of interesting rocks arranged on the windowsill. Every morning, Michael would wake to the sound of Noah getting himself ready for school, a level of independence that impressed and saddened him in equal measure. The boy would make his own lunch from whatever was available, pack his backpack without being reminded, and wait by the door for his father to drive him to school. At pickup time, Noah would be waiting with a smile and stories about his day, carefully avoiding any mention of field trips, school supplies, or activities that cost money. In the evenings, they would work on homework together at the kitchen table, Noah's math problems spread out next to Michael's bills and budgets. Sometimes Noah would ask about his mother, and Michael would share stories about Elizabeth's laugh, her terrible cooking, her way of making every small moment feel special. They would look through photo albums when the sadness felt manageable, remembering birthday parties and Christmas mornings when money hadn't been quite so tight and the future had seemed full of possibilities. The idea of buying property, any property, had seemed like an impossible dream until Michael heard about the county tax auction. Properties with unpaid taxes would be sold to the highest bidder, sometimes for remarkably small amounts. He'd driven by the courthouse several times, watching other people bid on land and buildings, wondering what it would feel like to own something, to have a place where no landlord could raise the rent or force them to move. On a whim, born of desperation and hope, he'd picked up the auction list from the county clerk's office. Most of the properties were far beyond his means, houses worth tens of thousands of dollars with back taxes in the thousands. But near the bottom of the list, he found a cabin on 2 acres of wooded land, back taxes of $50, minimum bid of $50. The property description was brief and not encouraging. Structure is severe disrepair. No utilities connected, access road in poor condition. But it was land, it was ownership. It was the possibility of giving Noah a place to call home, a place where they could build something together instead of just surviving from month to month. That night, Noah had found him studying the auction listing at the kitchen table. "What's that, Dad?" "Just something I'm thinking about, buddy. Remember how you're always drawing houses with big yards?" Noah nodded, moving closer to look over his father's shoulder. "Well, there's this place, just a cabin, probably needs a lot of work, but it's got 2 whole acres of woods, trees to climb, space to run around, maybe even a place to build a treehouse." The hope that flickered in Noah's eyes was almost painful to watch. Could we really buy it? Maybe. It's not much to look at now, but sometimes the most broken places hold the biggest possibilities. Noah had spent the next 3 days drawing pictures of their cabin, imagining how they might fix it up, where they might plant a garden, how they might clear a space for a workshop where his dad could fix cars and he could build things. The drawings showed a place transformed by love and hard work, a place where a father and son could create something beautiful together. On the morning of the auction, Michael had dressed in his best shirt and clean boots, the $50 folded carefully in his wallet alongside Elizabeth's ring. Noah had wanted to come along, but Michael explained that auctions were serious business, boring for kids. The truth was he couldn't bear to have Noah witness his disappointment if someone else outbid him, or if the cabin turned out to be even worse than described. As they prepared to leave for school that morning, Noah had given him a drawing of the two of them standing in front of a restored cabin, both of them smiling, a tire swing hanging from a massive oak tree. "For luck, Dad." Now sitting in his truck outside the courthouse, Michael unfolded that drawing and studied it again. In Noah's imagination, they looked happy. They looked like they belonged somewhere. They looked like a family that had found their way home. The auction was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. Around him, other bidders prepared for the day's business, investors with calculators and clipboards, contractors evaluating potential projects, families like his own, hoping for a miracle. He touched the $50 in his wallet and thought about the ring box in his pocket, the backup plan he prayed he wouldn't need. Sometimes the biggest leap of faith happens not when you're strong enough to succeed, but when you're too desperate to give up. Today would be one of those days. The county courthouse steps buzzed with the quiet energy of people hoping to change their lives with a single bid. Michael found himself among a modest crowd of maybe 30 people, each clutching auction sheets and wearing expressions that ranged from confident calculation to desperate hope. He recognized his own expression in the latter group, the families and individuals who saw this auction not as an investment opportunity, but as their one chance at ownership. The auctioneer, a weathered man named Carl Hendricks, who'd been conducting these sales for 15 years, climbed onto a makeshift platform with a portable microphone. His voice crackled to life, cutting through the morning air with the practiced rhythm of someone who understood that behind every bid was someone's dream or someone's last resort. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting with the commercial properties and working our way down to the residential and rural listings. Please have your bidder numbers ready, and remember that all sales are final, cash or certified check only." Michael's property was number 47 on a list of 52. He watched as houses, empty lots, and small commercial buildings went to investors with deep pockets and quick decisions. A gas station with environmental issues sold for $12,000. A house with foundation problems went for $8,000. Each successful bid represented someone's new beginning or business venture, but also reminded Michael how outclassed he was in this world of real estate speculation. As the morning wore on, his palms grew damp despite the cool October air. The $50 in his wallet felt increasingly inadequate as he listened to bids climb into the thousands. When they reached property number 40, he felt his heart begin to race. Number 41, residential lot on Maple Street, back taxes $850, minimum bid $850. Number 42, mobile home on leased land, Back taxes $600. Minimum bid $600. Each announcement brought him closer to the moment that would either change their lives or confirm that some dreams were simply too expensive for people like him. Number 47, Carl's voice announced, and Michael felt the ground seem to shift beneath his feet. Rural property, 2.3 acres, includes structure described as cabin. Back taxes $50. Minimum bid $50. A murmur rippled through the crowd. $50 was unusually low even for a property in poor condition. Several bidders flipped through their sheets trying to locate the listing they might have overlooked. This property is located on Pine Ridge Road, approximately 12 miles east of town. Access is via unpaved road. Structure reported in severe disrepair with no utilities connected. Buyer responsible for any environmental or structural issues. Carl's description was thorough and discouraging. Do I have an opening bid of $50? Michael's hand trembled as he raised it. His bidder number 63 felt heavy in his grip. I have $50 from bidder 63. Do I have 75 of them? The seconds stretched like hours. Michael scanned the crowd, expecting someone to raise their hand to outbid him with casual ease. But the other bidders were consulting their papers, many shaking their heads. A cabin in severe disrepair with no utilities and difficult access wasn't attractive to most investors. $50 from bidder 63. Going once, going twice. Carl's gavel hovered in the air. 75, called a voice from the back. Michael's stomach dropped as he turned to see a man in a clean work shirt and new boots, someone who looked like he flipped houses for a living. Carl nodded. I have 75. Do I have 100? This was it. Michael had exactly $50. He couldn't go higher. His dream was about to end, $25 short of success. He looked down at the drawing Noah had given him that morning, the picture of them smiling in front of their cabin, and felt something break inside his chest. Then he remembered Elizabeth's ring. His hand moved to his pocket, feeling the small velvet box. The ring was worth at least $300, maybe more. He could bid higher, win the property, and deal with pawning the ring afterward. But selling Elizabeth's ring meant letting go of the last physical piece of their marriage, the last tangible connection to the woman who had made them a family. 100, he called out, his voice steadier than he felt. Carl's eyebrows rose slightly. I have 100 from bidder 63. Do I have 125? The house flipper was studying his auction sheet more carefully now, probably researching the property's potential. The silence stretched for 30 seconds, then a full minute. 100 from bidder 63, going once, going twice. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo off the courthouse walls. Sold to bidder 63 for $100. The applause that followed was polite and brief, the kind given to any successful transaction. But to Michael, it sounded like thunder. He stood frozen for a moment, unable to process that he had actually won something, that he was now a landowner, that he had just purchased Noah's future for the price of a dinner at a decent restaurant. The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork, signatures, and the surreal process of handing over Elizabeth's wedding ring as collateral while he arranged payment. The county clerk was patient and thorough, explaining his rights and responsibilities as the new owner, providing him with property maps and contact information for utility companies. Congratulations, Mr. Carter, she said as she handed him the deed and a set of keys that looked like they'd been cut sometime in the 1980s. You're now the proud owner of 2.3 acres and whatever structures are on the property. The previous owner was a gentleman named Edward Blackwell, who lived there until the mid-1980s. Property's been abandoned since then. Michael stared at the keys' old tarnished brass with the kind of weight that suggested they'd opened many doors over many years. One appeared to be for the cabin itself, while the other was smaller, purpose unknown. The rusty keyring was simple and practical, the choice of someone who valued function over appearance. As he walked to his truck, deed and keys in hand, the reality of what he'd done began to settle in. He owned land. He owned a home, however broken it might be. He had given Noah Roots a place that belonged to them, a foundation on which they could build whatever came next. But he'd also committed them to a project that might be beyond their means to complete. What if the cabin was truly uninhabitable? What if the cost of repairs exceeded what they could manage? What if he'd just spent their last $100 on a problem too big to solve? The drive to pick up Noah from school passed in a haze of excitement and terror. When he saw his son waiting by the school entrance, backpack slung over one shoulder, and that careful smile that had learned not to expect too much, Michael felt his doubts dissolve into determination. Noah climbed into the passenger seat and immediately noticed his father's expression. "Dad, you look different and what happened?" Michael held up the keys, watching Noah's eyes widen as understanding dawned. "We got it, buddy. We got our cabin." The joy that spread across Noah's face was worth every dollar, every doubt, every risk. For the first time in 18 months, his son looked like a child who believed in possibilities again. "Can we see it? Can we go there right now?" Michael looked at the clock on the dashboard. 3:30. They had maybe 3 hours of daylight, left enough time to drive out to their property and get their first look at what they'd bought. "Let's go home," Michael said. And for the first time since Elizabeth died, the word home referred to something that actually belonged to them. The dirt road to their property turned out to be more of a suggestion than an actual road. Pine Ridge Road started as cracked asphalt at the main highway, transitioned to gravel after the first mile, and devolved into two tire tracks separated by a ridge of weeds and saplings for the final stretch. Michael's Honda bounced and scraped over roots and stones, the undercarriage protesting with metallic complaints that made him wince. "This is like a real adventure," Noah said, gripping his door handle as they navigated around a fallen branch. His excitement was infectious, transforming what could have been concerns about accessibility into the thrill of exploration. After 20 minutes of careful driving, the trees opened into a small clearing, and there it was, their cabin. Michael stopped the truck, and both of them sat in silence, taking in their first real look at what they'd bought. The structure stood like a forgotten memory in the center of the clearing, partially hidden by 20 years of aggressive vine growth. What had once been a modest log cabin now appeared to be wearing a green sweater of ivy, Virginia creeper, and wild grapevines that had claimed the wall's roof and most of the windows. The front porch sagged at one corner where a support post had rotted through, and several roof shingles had surrendered to time and weather, leaving dark patches that promised leaks. But it was theirs. Noah was the first to speak. "It's bigger than I thought it would be." Michael studied the structure with his mechanic's eye for problems and potential. The log walls appeared solid despite the vegetation, and the stone chimney stood straight and intact. The cabin was perhaps 24 feet wide and 30 feet deep, with what looked like a small addition on the back that might have been a bedroom or storage room. "What do you think, Buddy's still excited about our new home?" Noah opened his door and stepped out, his sneakers crunching on fallen leaves and twigs. "It's perfect, Dad. It just needs some help." They approached the front porch, cautiously testing the floorboards before putting their full weight down. The wood was weathered gray, but felt solid beneath their feet. Michael fitted the larger brass key into the front door lock, surprised when it turned easily despite its age. The door swung open with a groan of hinges that hadn't moved in years, revealing the interior of their cabin. Afternoon sunlight slanted through gaps in the vegetation, covering the windows, creating a green-filtered twilight that made everything seem underwater. The main room was larger than their apartment's living room, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and built-in shelves flanking it on both sides. The wooden floors were warped in places where rain had leaked through the roof, but they appeared to be solid hardwood beneath the dust and debris. A small kitchen occupied the back corner with cabinets that had weathered the years better than expected, and a window that would offer a view of the woods once the vines were cleared. "Look, Dad," Noah said, pointing to the back of the main room. "There's stairs." A narrow staircase led to what must be a loft area, though the upper level was too dark to see clearly. To the right of the stairs, a doorway led to the addition they had seen from outside. Noah was already exploring, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. He peered into the back room and called out, "There's another bedroom back here, and it has its own window." Michael moved through the space, slowly, mentally cataloging the work they'd need to do. Clear the vines, repair the roof, check the foundation, install electricity and plumbing. When he listed it that way, the project seemed overwhelming. But standing in the filtered light of their own cabin, breathing air that smelled of old wood and growing things, the work felt like possibility rather than burden. "Dad, come here," Noah called from near the fireplace. He was kneeling beside the built-in shelves, running his hands along the wood grain. "Some of these boards are loose." Michael joined his son and examined the shelving. Sure enough, several of the shelf boards could be lifted out, revealing gaps where smaller items might have been stored. As Noah lifted one of the longer boards, something crackled beneath it. "There's paper stuck under here," Noah said, working the board free carefully. What emerged were several sheets of aged paper, yellowed at the edges and covered with handwriting and faded blue ink. The pages appeared to be journal entries dated from the mid-1980s and written in a careful, educated hand. Michael held the pages up to catch the filtered light coming through the windows and read the first entry aloud. March 15th, 1987. "The work is nearly complete. 23 years of research, and I believe I have finally solved the fundamental problems that have plagued the field since Tesla's early experiments. The applications are extraordinary, but I fear the implications if this knowledge falls into the wrong hands. I have decided to document everything and secure it properly. If something happens to me, perhaps someday the right person will find it and understand what needs to be done." Noah moved closer to his father as Michael continued reading. "The government men came by again today. They are persistent, these people who want to classify my work to lock it away in some vault where it will benefit no one. They offer contracts and veiled threats in equal measure. I have told them nothing, but I know they will not give up easily. I am not a young man anymore, and I cannot run forever." The handwriting was that of someone educated and thoughtful, but there was an urgency in the later entries that suggested growing pressure. "Who do you think wrote this?" Noah asked, peering over his father's shoulder at the intricate drawings that accompanied the text. "Someone named Edward," Michael said, remembering what the county clerk had told him. "Edward Blackwell. He used to live here." They spent the next hour exploring the cabin more thoroughly, Noah's excitement growing with each discovery. In the back bedroom, they found built-in drawers that still contained a few items: old clothing, a pair of reading glasses, a small toolkit that looked well used but carefully maintained. The loft area proved to be a single room with slanted ceilings and windows on both ends. It would make a perfect bedroom for Noah, with views of the forest canopy and enough space for a desk where he could draw and do homework. As the afternoon sun began to slant lower through the trees, they sat on the front porch steps, sharing a package of crackers Michael had brought from the truck. The clearing around their cabin was larger than it had first appeared, with mature oak and maple trees providing a natural border. Through the trees, they could glimpse what might be a stream or creek. "So what do you think, Noah? Is this the kind of place you imagined when you were drawing those pictures?" Noah leaned against his father's shoulder, the gesture of contentment that had become rare since Elizabeth's death. "It's better, Dad. In my drawings, it was just me and you. But this place feels like it has stories, like it's been waiting for us." Michael looked at the weathered pages in his hands, thinking about the man who had written those journal entries, who had lived in this cabin and worked on something important enough that people had pursued him for it. Edward Blackwell had been alone here at the end, but he'd left traces of his life, fragments of his story that somehow made the cabin feel less abandoned and more like a home waiting to be reclaimed. As they drove back toward town in the gathering dusk, Noah was already making plans for the cleanup work they could start that weekend. They would need basic tools, cleaning supplies, and tarps to cover areas where the roof was compromised. The work would be hard, but they would do it together. For the first time since Elizabeth died, Michael felt like they were moving towards something instead of just trying to survive each day. The cabin was broken, but it was theirs to fix. The work ahead was daunting, but it was work with purpose, work that would create something lasting for both of them. The weathered journal pages lay on the dashboard between them. Edward Blackwell's words, a reminder that their cabin held more than just shelter. It held secrets, stories, and perhaps the promise that even the most broken places could be transformed by the right hands and the right heart. Saturday morning arrived with the crisp promise of October, and Noah was awake before dawn, his excitement about their first full day of work on the cabin making sleep impossible. Michael found him at the kitchen table eating cereal while sketching detailed plans for clearing vines and organizing tools. "I figured out a system," Noah announced as his father poured coffee. "We start with the front of the house so people can see we're making it nice, then work around to the sides and save the back for last, because nobody really sees that part anyway." Michael studied his son's drawing, impressed by the logical approach and attention to detail. "That's smart thinking, buddy. What about the inside?" "That's phase 2, Noah said with the seriousness of a project manager. "First we make the outside look good, then we work on making the inside livable." They loaded the Honda with every tool Michael owned, a modest collection of wrenches, screwdrivers, a hammerwork gloves, and a small stepladder. From their meager savings, he'd managed to buy a set of hedge trimmers, a tarp, and basic cleaning supplies. It wasn't much for a complete cabin restoration, but it was enough to begin. The drive out to Pine Ridge Road felt different in daylight, the forest around them alive with fall colors and the sounds of birds and small animals going about their morning routines. When they reached their clearing, the cabin looked more hopeful in the golden morning light, as if it were ready to shed its shroud of neglect and return to life. Noah attacked the vine removal with the enthusiasm of someone half his age carefully untangling Virginia creeper from around the front windows, while Michael worked on the heavier growth covering the porch roof. The work was satisfying in a way that surprised them both. Each section of cleared wall revealed more of the cabin's original character, like uncovering a painting that had been hidden under layers of dust. "Dad, look at this," Noah called from beside the front door. He had cleared enough vines to reveal a small wooden plaque mounted beside the entrance. The wood was weathered, but the carved letters were still readable. Blackwell, 1962. "Edward built this place himself," Michael said, running his fingers over the carved letters. He was 25 years old when he started. As they worked, they began to understand more about the man who had lived here. The cabin had been constructed with unusual attention to detail. Joints fitted precisely, logs carefully selected, and matched windows positioned to capture maximum light while maintaining privacy. This wasn't a weekend retreat thrown together by amateurs. It was the careful work of someone who understood both craftsmanship and engineering. By noon, they had cleared the front wall, completely revealing windows that, while dirty and spiderwebbed, appeared to be intact and of surprisingly good quality. The afternoon was spent working on the interior, sweeping out years of leaves and debris, washing windows, and beginning to assess what needed repair versus what needed replacement. It was while cleaning the main room that Noah made his next discovery. He had been working on the stone fireplace, using a brush to clear away years of soot and debris, when he noticed that one of the stones seemed different from the others. "This one's loose," he told his father, wiggling a stone about the size of a brick that sat at shoulder height on the left side of the fireplace. Michael examined the stone and found that it could be removed entirely, revealing a small cavity behind it. Inside the hollow space were more papers, not journal pages this time, but technical drawings rendered in precise detail with notes in the same careful handwriting they'd found under the floorboards. The first drawing showed what appeared to be an electrical circuit, but unlike anything Michael had seen in his years working on car electrical systems, the design was complex with components labeled in technical terminology that was beyond his understanding. At the bottom of the page in Edward's methodical script were the words, "Resonance Frequency Amplification System Prototype 7. "What is it, Dad?" Noah asked, peering over his father's shoulder at the intricate drawings. "I'm not sure, some kind of electrical invention. Your friend Edward was apparently quite the engineer." The second drawing was even more complex, showing what looked like a three-dimensional structure with precise measurements in multiple cross-sections. This diagram was labeled Hybrid Solar Thermal Energy Converter Final Design Specifications. As Michael studied the drawings, his mechanical mind began to recognize certain principles, despite the advanced nature of the designs. These weren't random inventions or amateur experiments. They represented sophisticated engineering with practical applications that he could only begin to guess at. "There's more," Noah said, reaching deeper into the cavity. He pulled out a small metal object wrapped in oiled cloth, a component that matched one of the elements shown in the circuit diagram. The piece was beautifully machined with tolerances that spoke of professional precision and expensive equipment. "He wasn't just designing these things," Michael said quietly. "He was building them." They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the cabin with new eyes, looking for other hidden compartments or storage areas. In the back bedroom, Noah discovered that one of the built-in drawers had a false bottom, beneath which lay more circuit diagrams and what appeared to be a parts inventory list written in Edward's careful hand. The list was extensive and technical. Copper wire gauge 12 AWG 500 feet. Ceramic capacitors 0.1 MF 24 units. Precision resistors 1% tolerance, various values. Ferrite core transformers, custom wound. Someone had invested serious money and time in acquiring specialized components. As evening approached and they prepared to head back to town, both father and son felt the weight of mystery settling around their new home. The cabin wasn't just an abandoned building. It was the workshop and laboratory of someone who had been working on inventions advanced enough to attract government attention. During the drive home, Noah was uncharacteristically quiet, processing the implications of what they'd discovered. "Dad," he finally said as they reached the paved road, "do you think Mr. Edward is still alive somewhere?" Michael considered the question carefully. The journal entry suggested that Edward had been under pressure from government agents in 1987, nearly 40 years ago. The man would be quite elderly now, assuming he had survived whatever situation had forced him to abandon his home. "I don't know, buddy. The journal entries were from a long time ago, but I think maybe he left all those papers and drawings for someone like us to find. Someone like us people who would appreciate the cabin, who would take care of it, and maybe understand that his work was important." As they pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex, Noah turned to look back in the direction they'd come from, toward the woods, where their cabin waited in the darkness. "I think he picked us, Dad. I think somehow he knew we would be the ones to find his stuff and take care of his house." Michael looked at his son's serious expression and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October evening air, because as impossible as it seemed, he was beginning to think Noah might be right. For the next week, Noah talked of nothing but the cabin and the mysterious Edward Blackwell. Each evening after dinner, they would spread the technical drawings across their kitchen table, trying to make sense of the complex diagrams and cryptic notations. Michael had always been good with mechanical systems. It was what made him a successful auto mechanic. But he'd also taken 2 years of electrical engineering courses at the community college before dropping out to marry Elizabeth and take a full-time job. These designs operated on principles beyond his training, but not entirely beyond his comprehension. "I wish I'd finished college," he told Noah one night, as they studied a particularly complex circuit diagram. "Your mom always said I should go back and get my engineering degree." Noah looked up from his own careful examination of the papers. "You still could, Dad. And maybe Mr. Edward left instructions somewhere, like a teacher leaving lessons for us to find." Michael smiled at his son's optimism. The boy had a way of seeing possibilities where others saw only obstacles. "Maybe he did. We'll keep looking this weekend." At Davidson's Auto Repair, Michael found himself thinking about Edward's designs even as he worked on transmissions and brake systems. There was something familiar about the principles at play in those resonance amplification circuits, something that reminded him of the electromagnetic systems in modern hybrid vehicles. Frank Davidson noticed his distraction during a particularly complicated transmission rebuild. "You're somewhere else today, Michael. Everything okay with you and Noah?" Michael hesitated, unsure how much to share about their discoveries. "We bought a place, Frank, a cabin out on Pine Ridge Road. It needs a lot of work, but it's ours." Davidson's weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "Well, that's something. Didn't know you were looking to buy. Good for you, Michael. You and the boy need your own place." "There's something else," Michael added. "The cabin belonged to an inventor named Edward Blackwell. We found some of his work hidden in the walls, technical drawings, journals, things like that. I think he might have been working on some kind of advanced energy system." Davidson's expression shifted from congratulatory to thoughtful. "Blackwell. The name sounds familiar. Wait a minute." He disappeared into his cluttered office and returned with a yellowed newspaper clipping. "Thought I remembered something. This was in the paper back in '87 or '88, guy named Blackwell who lived out in the woods. There was some controversy about his research." Michael examined the faded newsprint. The article was brief, describing Edward Blackwell as a reclusive inventor who had worked for a defense contractor in the 1960s before retiring to pursue independent research. The controversy had involved a dispute with federal authorities over patents and classified information. The article ended with a cryptic statement: "Blackwell's whereabouts are currently unknown, though associates suggest he may have relocated overseas to continue his work." "He just disappeared," Michael murmured. Davidson nodded. "That's how I remember it. There were rumors about government agents coming to town looking for his research. Nothing ever came of it that I heard. People forgot about it after a while. Mind if I keep this? It's yours, and Michael, be careful with whatever you found. Some secrets stay buried for a reason." By their third weekend at the cabin, Michael and Noah had established a rhythm to their renovation work. Mornings were spent on exterior cleanup and repairs, clearing vines, patching the roof with materials salvaged from a construction site dumpster, rebuilding the sagging porch steps. Afternoons were dedicated to interior work and exploration, searching for more of Edward's hidden caches while making the space more livable. Noah had claimed the loft as his bedroom, sweeping away decades of dust and cobwebs to create a space that felt like his own. Michael would sleep in the main room until they could make the back bedroom habitable. "We'll need to figure out electricity and plumbing before winter," Michael said as they shared sandwiches on the porch steps. "I've been thinking about those solar panel diagrams we found. Maybe Edward was working on a self-sufficient power system for the cabin." Noah nodded enthusiastically. "Like off-grid living, I'd read about that in a book at school. People use solar panels and wind turbines to make their own electricity." "Exactly. And if Edward was as smart as his designs suggest, maybe he figured out something even better." Their conversation was interrupted by Noah suddenly jumping to his feet. "Dad, I almost forgot. I was going to clean out that crawl space under the floor today." Michael glanced at his watch. "We've got a few hours of daylight left. Just be careful down there. Watch out for spiders and anything sharp." Noah was already heading for the small access door on the side of the cabin, flashlight in hand. "I'll be careful. Maybe I'll find another secret compartment." Michael smiled at his son's enthusiasm. Noah had taken to their weekend explorations with the spirit of a born adventurer. The cabin renovation had awakened something in the boy that had been dormant since Elizabeth's death, a sense of purpose and excitement about the future. Michael was sorting through salvaged building materials when Noah's shout came from beneath the cabin. "Dad, Dad, you have to see this. There's a whole box of stuff down here." Michael dropped what he was doing and hurried to the crawl space access. Lying on his stomach, he peered into the dark space beneath the cabin, where Noah's flashlight beam danced excitedly. "Look what I found. It was wedged between the floor joists all the way in the corner." Michael crawled into the cramped space, his flashlight beam joining Noah's to illuminate a metal strongbox that had been carefully hidden beneath the structure. The box was about the size of a small suitcase made of heavy steel, with a combination lock that looked both sturdy and old. Together, they worked the box free from its hiding place and dragged it out into the daylight. It was heavier than expected, suggesting it contained more than just papers. Once they had it on the porch, they examined it more closely. The metal was slightly corroded but intact, and whatever was inside had been protected from moisture and time. "Should we try to open it?" Noah asked, his voice hushed with anticipation. Michael examined the combination lock. 3 wheels, numbers 0 through 9 on each. That meant 1,000 possible combinations, assuming they had to try them all. But something told him that Edward Blackwell wouldn't have chosen a random number. "Let's think about this logically," he said. "If you were hiding something important, what numbers would you use for the combination?" Noah studied the box thoughtfully. Maybe his birthday or the year he built the cabin. They tried 1960, the year carved on the plaque by the front door. Nothing. They tried various combinations of numbers they'd seen in the journal entries. Still nothing. After several failed attempts, Michael sat back on his heels, puzzled. There must be a clue somewhere in what we've already found. Noah was already sifting through the technical drawings they'd collected. "Dad, what about these numbers here? In the corner of this diagram." In the corner of the first circuit diagram, almost too small to notice, were the numbers 743 written in pencil. It seemed oddly placed, not connected to any component measurement or calculation. "Worth a try," Michael said, reaching for the lock. He carefully aligned the wheels to read 743, then pulled on the latch. The lock opened with 3 satisfying clicks. Noah's eyes widened. "You did it." "Nobody, you did it. Good eye spotting those numbers." They opened the lid slowly, uncertain what they might find inside. The box had been carefully packed, its contents wrapped in waterproof plastic and organized with military precision. Michael removed the items one by one, laying them out on the porch floor. Inside the box, wrapped in waterproof plastic, were treasures that made their previous discoveries seem like previews of a much larger story. The first item was a hand-drawn map of their property, but far more detailed than anything the county had provided. This map showed not just the boundaries of their 2 acres, but topographical features, underground water sources, and several locations marked with cryptic symbols. Beneath the map were more technical drawings, but these were different from what they'd found before. These diagrams showed complete systems rather than individual components with notations that suggested working prototypes had been built and tested. Most intriguing of all was a vintage compass, not the plastic kind used for camping, but a precision instrument made of brass and steel with a weighted needle that moved smoothly and accurately despite its apparent age. The compass was engraved with the initials EB and a date 1965. "This is beautiful," Noah said, turning the compass in his hands and watching the needle adjust to magnetic north. "It's like something from a pirate movie." Michael was studying the map, comparing the symbols marked on it to their actual surroundings. One symbol located about 50 yards behind the cabin, near what the map indicated was a natural spring, caught his attention. It looked like a combination of geometric shapes that didn't match any standard surveying notation he had ever seen. "What do you think these marks mean?" he asked, showing Noah the various symbols scattered across the map. Noah examined the markings with the intense concentration he usually reserved for his artwork. "They look like a treasure map, like someone buried things in different places around our property." The more Michael studied the map, the more he had to agree with his son's assessment. The symbols weren't random. They appeared to be deliberately placed to mark specific locations, and several of them had numbers beside them that might indicate some kind of sequence or priority. There was one more item in the box, a small leather journal, its pages filled with Edward's handwriting. Unlike the technical entries they'd found before, these were more personal reflections documenting his thoughts as he developed his inventions. One entry stood out: April 4th, 1983. "The hybrid energy system passed all tests today. Full integration of solar thermal and resonance amplification components achieves stable output at 45% efficiency compared to conventional systems. This is the breakthrough I've been working toward for 2 decades. With this technology, a single household could generate enough clean energy to be completely self-sufficient with minimal environmental impact. The implications for remote communities are enormous, but I fear what some might do with this knowledge. There are always those who would weaponize progress or monopolize it for profit. I must be careful about documentation and storage. The markers are in place. The plans are secured. If the right person finds this work, they will understand what to do with it." Michael read the entry aloud to Noah, whose face lit up with excitement. "Dad, he invented some super efficient energy system, and he hid the plans around our property." "It certainly looks that way," Michael agreed. "But why hide everything instead of patenting it? And why was the government so interested?" He flipped forward a few pages in the journal and found a possible answer: June 18th, 1986. "Another visit from the Energy Department representatives today. Their offers grow more insistent, their threats more thinly veiled. They speak of national security and classified research, but their eyes betray their true interests. They see weapons where I see liberation from fossil fuels. They see military applications where I see villages with clean power. I cannot allow my life's work to be perverted in this way. I have begun preparations to secure everything. The property will likely be seized for back taxes eventually. I can only hope that whoever finds it will be worthy of the trust I am placing in them." Armed with the compass and map, they spent the remainder of the afternoon exploring areas of their property they hadn't yet investigated. The land was more varied than they'd realized, with rolling hills, a year-round creek, and several natural clearings that would be perfect for gardens or workshop space. The symbol marked closest to the cabin, she led them to what appeared to be a natural spring feeding into their creek. The water ran clear and cold, forming a small pool before continuing downstream. But it was what they found near the spring that made them both stop and stare. Partially hidden by ferns and fallen logs was a concrete structure about the size of a large grave marker, but clearly man-made and purposeful. The concrete was weathered but intact, and set into its top surface was a metal plate with another symbol etched into it, the same symbol that appeared on their map. "It's like a marker," Noah said, kneeling beside the concrete structure. "Like Edward left signs for people to follow." Michael examined the metal plate more closely and discovered that it wasn't just decorative. It could be rotated like a dial, each click aligning the etched symbol with one of several small notches cut into the concrete around its edge. "Dad, look at this," Noah called from a few feet away. He had been exploring around the spring and found another metal object partially buried in the soft earth near the water's edge, a small cylindrical device about the size of a flashlight made of the same kind of precision machined metal they'd found in the fireplace. The cylinder was heavier than it looked, with one end that could be unscrewed to reveal complex internal components. Unlike the simple elegance of the compass, this device looked unmistakably modern, even futuristic, despite being buried for who knew how many years. "What do you think it does?" Noah asked. Michael turned the device in his hands, noting the quality of the machining and the unusual design of the internal components. Whatever it was, it represented significant engineering expertise and expensive materials. "I think," he said slowly, "we're beginning to understand that your friend Edward wasn't just an inventor. He was an inventor who built things that worked." As afternoon shifted toward evening, they marked the location of the spring and the concrete structure on their own copy of Edward's map, starting what Noah insisted on calling their treasure inventory. The original map showed at least 6 other symbols scattered around their property, each potentially marking another cache or clue left by their mysterious predecessor. Walking back toward the cabin through the lengthening shadows, both father and son were quiet, processing the implications of what they'd found. The metal cylinder weighed heavy in Michael's pocket, a reminder that their simple renovation project was evolving into something much more complex and potentially significant. "Dad," Noah said as they approached their cabin, "do you think we should tell anyone about this stuff?" It was a question Michael had been asking himself all afternoon. The journal entry suggested that Edward had been hiding from people who wanted to control his work. If those same people or their successors were still around, revealing Edward's secrets might bring unwanted attention to their quiet property and their simple dream of building a home together. "I think," Michael said carefully, "that for now this should be our secret. Edward trusted someone to find his work and take care of it. Maybe that someone is us." Noah nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of the responsibility they'd inherited along with their property. As they prepared to head back to town, Michael took one last look at their cabin, now partially cleared of vines and looking more like a home with each weekend's work. But it was also becoming something else, a repository of secrets, a testament to one man's lifetime of innovation, and perhaps the key to understanding something far more valuable than either of them had imagined when they'd made that desperate bid at the county auction. The compass in Noah's pocket pointed steadily north, but Michael had the feeling their true direction was still being determined by forces they didn't yet understand. The fourth weekend at the cabin dawned clear and cool, with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes every color more vivid, every sound more distinct. Michael and Noah arrived early, eager to continue their exploration of the mysterious markers on Edward's map. They had spent the week studying the map, planning a systematic approach to visiting each location. "Today's going to be different, Dad," Noah said as they unloaded their supplies. "We're not just fixing the cabin, we're treasure hunters." Michael smiled at his son's enthusiasm. The boy had made a special belt pouch for Edward's brass compass, and he wore it proudly at his waist like an explorer from another century. "That's right, buddy. But remember, we're looking for knowledge, not gold. Whatever Edward hid out there, he meant it to help people, not make someone rich." Noah nodded solemnly. "I know. It's like a responsibility. He trusted whoever found his cabin to use his inventions the right way." They spread the map across the hood of the Honda, the brass compass beside it catching the morning sunlight. Michael had marked the locations. They'd already explored the cabin itself and the concrete marker by the spring. 6 more symbols remained scattered across their property, each one potentially holding another piece of Edward's technological puzzle. "Let's start with this one," Michael said, pointing to a symbol on the eastern edge of their land. "According to the map, it's on a ridge overlooking the valley. Might give us a good view of the whole property, too." Noah studied the symbol, a starburst pattern with 8 points. "That's the farthest one from the cabin." "Why start there?" Michael tapped his finger on the map. "Look at the numbers beside each symbol. This one is marked with a 1. I'm thinking Edward numbered these in the order he wanted someone to find them." "You mean like a sequence, like each one gives you information you need for the next one?" "Exactly. And if we're right, this is where he meant us to begin." Armed with a compass, map, and backpacks containing water sandwiches and basic tools, they set off through the autumn woods. The terrain grew steeper as they moved east, forcing them to navigate around fallen trees and rocky outcroppings. Noah led the way, checking the compass frequently and matching landmarks to the topographical features on the map. As they climbed, Michael was impressed by his son's natural ability to navigate. The boy moved through the forest with growing confidence, reading the land and following the compass bearings with precision that belied his 9 years. "Dad, I think we're getting close," Noah called back. "The compass needle is acting weird when I point it toward that big rock formation." Michael caught up to his son and examined the compass. Sure enough, the needle wavered and trembled when pointed at a granite outcropping ahead of them, as if pulled by some magnetic force other than north. "That's not normal," Michael said, frowning. "Something must be affecting the magnetic field." As they approached the rock formation, they discovered it wasn't a natural feature at all, but a carefully constructed cairn of stones weathered by decades of exposure, but unmistakably man-made. Set into the center of the cairn was a metal plate identical to the one they had found by the spring, but engraved with the 8-pointed starburst from their map. "It's another marker," Noah said excitedly, "just like on the map." Michael examined the metal plate, noting that, like the previous one, it could be rotated. When he turned it, it clicked into different positions, each one aligning the starburst pattern with notches cut into the surrounding stone. "What happens if we turn it to point north?" Noah suggested. Michael aligned the starburst with the north notch, and they both jumped back in surprise as a section of the cairn slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a metal tube sealed against the elements containing rolled papers and a smaller metal container. Michael carefully extracted the contents, spreading the papers on a flat section of rock. The first document was a detailed schematic of what appeared to be a solar collection system, but unlike any conventional design. The panels were arranged in a pattern that resembled the 8-pointed starburst on the marker, with notes indicating optimal positioning for different seasons and sun angles. "It looks like some kind of super-efficient solar array," Michael said, studying the technical drawings. "But these measurements, if I'm reading this right, Edward was claiming an efficiency rate nearly twice what modern panels can achieve." Noah was examining the smaller metal container, which had opened to reveal a set of photovoltaic cells, but with a strange crystalline structure embedded in their surface. "Are these solar cells, Dad? They look different from the ones on our school's roof." Michael took one of the cells, holding it up to the sunlight. The crystal structure caught the light in unexpected ways, refracting it in patterns that suggested advanced optical engineering. "These aren't just solar cells. They are some kind of hybrid technology. See how the crystals are arranged. They're designed to capture wavelengths of light that normal panels would miss." "There's a note too," Noah said, pulling out a folded paper from beneath the cells. In Edward's now familiar handwriting was a brief message to the finder. "What you hold is the first component of an integrated energy system. These photovoltaic cells incorporate rare earth elements and custom crystal matrices to achieve 45% conversion efficiency across the pulse solar spectrum, including infrared and ultraviolet ranges. The remaining markers will guide you to the other components. Follow in sequence." Michael whistled softly. 45% efficiency. That's remarkable by current standards. Most commercial panels are around 20 to 25% efficient. "Is that good?" Noah asked. "Good, it's revolutionary. If these cells were as described, they could generate nearly twice as much power from the same amount of sunlight as the best modern panels." They carefully repacked the cells and documents, marking the location on their map. As they descended the ridge, Michael's mind raced with implications. The technology in that simple metal tube represented a breakthrough that major energy companies had spent billions trying to achieve, and it was just the first of 7 markers. The second marker, located near the creek that ran through their property, yielded another surprise. This time, the hidden cache contained detailed plans for a micro-hydroelectric system that could generate consistent power from even small water flows. Unlike conventional designs that required significant water pressure or volume, Edwards' system used principles of vortex dynamics to amplify the energy potential of modest streams. The third marker, found beneath a distinctive lightning-scarred oak tree, revealed components of an advanced energy storage system, not batteries in the conventional sense, but a complex arrangement of supercapacitors and what Edward called resonance chambers that could store and release energy with minimal loss. With each discovery, the picture grew clearer. Edward Blackwell hadn't just been tinkering with existing technology. He'd been developing an integrated energy system decades ahead of its time, one that could harness multiple renewable sources and store the resulting power with unprecedented efficiency. By late afternoon, they had located 4 of the 7 markers, each one yielding another piece of Edward's master design. They were heading toward the 5th location when Noah stopped suddenly, pointing at a structure barely visible through the trees. "Dad, what's that building? It's not on the map." Michael squinted in the direction his son was indicating. About 50 yards away stood what appeared to be a small shed or outbuilding, its weathered boards nearly the same gray-brown as the surrounding forest. "I don't know, buddy. It might be another structure that came with the property." The clerk didn't mention anything besides the main cabin. They approached cautiously. The building was approximately 10 feet square with a slanted roof and no windows. A padlock secured the door, corroded by decades of exposure but still intact. "Do you think the key we found might fit this?" Noah asked, referring to the second key that had come with their property deed, the smaller one, whose purpose had remained unknown. Michael examined the padlock. "It's worth a try." He removed the key from his pocket and inserted it into the lock. It turned with surprising ease, as if the mechanism had been recently oiled and maintained. The door swung open to reveal a simple storage shed containing garden tools, maintenance equipment, and several metal shelves holding various supplies. But something about the dimensions troubled Michael's mechanical mind. "Noah, does this space seem smaller inside than outside to you?" Noah looked around, considering. "Yeah, it does. It should be bigger on the inside based on how big it looks from outside." Michael ran his hands along the back wall, studying the construction. The woodwork was expertly done with precisely fitted boards and careful joinery, but one section of the wall didn't match the rest. The grain pattern was slightly different, the boards newer by perhaps a decade. He pressed experimentally against different spots on the wall. When his hand met a particular knot in the wood, he felt something give slightly. "I think there's a hidden door or panel here," he said, applying more pressure. With a click and the whisper of well-balanced hinges, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. Noah's eyes widened. A secret door. Michael pulled out his flashlight and shone it through the opening. What they saw made them both gasp. Beyond the false wall lay a steep stairway descending into what appeared to be an underground chamber. Metal railings lined the stairs, and at the bottom they could see the dim outlines of electronic equipment. "It's an underground room," Michael whispered. "Edward built an entire hidden laboratory beneath this shed." "Should we go down?" Noah asked, his voice a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Michael hesitated. The hidden lab clearly represented the heart of Edward's work, the place where his inventions had moved from theory to reality. But there was no telling what condition it might be in after decades of abandonment, or what hazards might await them. "Let me go first," he decided. "Stay close behind me, and if I tell you to go back, you do it immediately. Understand?" Noah nodded solemnly. They descended the stairs carefully, their flashlight beams probing the darkness. At the bottom, Michael's hand found a switch on the wall. With nothing to lose, he flipped it. To their astonishment, lights flickered on and illuminating a space that seemed to belong to another world or another time. The underground laboratory was approximately 30 feet square, with concrete walls reinforced by steel beams. Workbenches lined 3 sides covered with electronic equipment, precision tools, and partially assembled devices. In the center of the room stood a larger construction, a circular platform surrounded by what appeared to be power conduits and monitoring equipment. But the most shocking aspect wasn't the laboratory itself. It was the condition. Unlike the abandoned cabin above, this space showed no signs of decades-long neglect. The floors were clean, the equipment dust-free, the air surprisingly fresh and circulated. "Someone's been here," Michael said quietly. "Recently." Noah moved to one of the workbenches, examining a complex device that hummed softly. "Dad, this is running. It's actually turned on." Michael joined his son, studying the equipment. The device appeared to be a monitoring system of some kind, with digital readouts showing power levels, temperatures, and other measurements. A small green light pulsed steadily in one corner. "It's not just running," Michael realized. "It's been maintained. The question is, by whom?" They moved through the laboratory, cautiously taking in the remarkable array of technology. One section was dedicated to what appeared to be solar energy research, with modified photovoltaic cells, similar to those they'd found at the first marker, but in various stages of refinement. Another area held hydroelectric equipment that matched the designs from their second cache, including a working model of the vortex generator. A third workspace contained energy storage components, the supercapacitors and resonance chambers from the third marker. This is where he built everything, Noah said with awe. All the stuff from the markers. It all came from here. Michael nodded, his attention drawn to a desk in the corner. Unlike the technical workspaces, this area was personal, containing notebooks, reference materials, and framed photographs. He picked up one of the photos showing a younger Edward Blackwell in military uniform, standing beside what appeared to be an early prototype of his energy system. A notebook lay open on the desk, the handwriting unmistakably Edward's, but the ink was fresh. The entry dated just 1 week earlier. The new owners continue to surprise me. Their methodical approach to the markers shows intelligence and respect for the work. The boy especially demonstrates remarkable intuition. Finding the combination to the strongbox was impressive. They are proceeding exactly as I hoped. Soon, it will be time to make contact. Michael's blood ran cold. Noah Edward Blackwell is alive and he's been watching us. But that would make him really old, Noah said, frowning. In his late 80s at least, Michael agreed. But this entry is dated last week and this laboratory has been maintained for decades. Someone has been taking care of this place all along. A larger technical manual on the desk caught Michael's attention. Unlike the individual component designs they'd found at the markers, this document appeared to be a comprehensive guide to Edward's complete energy system. The title page read, Integrated Renewable Energy Amplification System, Technical Specifications and Construction Guidelines. Below the title was a brief introduction. This manual details the complete IREAS technology capable of providing sustainable clean energy at scales ranging from single households to small communities. By integrating solar hydrogeothermal and ambient thermal collection with advanced storage and distribution systems, IREAS achieves overall system efficiency of 45% with zero environmental impact. The technology represents 30 years of independent research and development, free from corporate or government control. Michael flipped through the pages, his technical mind struggling to process the sophistication of what he was seeing. The individual components they'd discovered were impressive enough, but the integrated system described in the manual was revolutionary, a complete reinvention of how energy could be generated, stored, and distributed. "Dad, look at this," Noah called from another workbench. The boy had found a scale model of what appeared to be their cabin and the surrounding property, but transformed. In the model, the cabin had been fully restored with subtle solar collectors integrated into the roof design. A small water wheel was positioned on the creek, and throughout the property, other collection devices were strategically placed to harvest energy from multiple sources. Most striking was a central unit behind the cabin, a sleek, unobtrusive structure that appeared to be the heart of the system where all the collected energy would be processed and stored. "It's a plan for our property," Noah said. "It shows how the whole system could be installed to power the cabin." And not just the cabin, Michael realized. According to these specifications, this system could generate enough power for at least 10 households. As they continued, exploring a drawer in the desk yielded another surprise, a thick folder containing legal documents, government correspondence, and what appeared to be threatening letters from a corporation called Horizon Energy. The earliest documents dated from the 1970s, when Edward had first begun patenting components of his system. The correspondence showed a pattern: initial interest from energy companies and government agencies, followed by pressure to sell exclusive rights, culminating in increasingly hostile actions when Edward refused to relinquish control of his inventions. A letter from Horizon Energy's CEO dated 1985 was particularly revealing. "Dr. Blackwell, our final offer stands at $2.5 million for exclusive rights to your energy amplification technology. While generous, this offer expires in 30 days. Should you decline, be advised that our legal department has identified several areas where your work potentially infringes on our existing patents. Additionally, we have brought your research to the attention of certain government agencies who may have interest in classifying this technology on national security grounds. I strongly suggest you reconsider your position on this matter. Cooperation would be beneficial to all parties involved." Beneath this letter was Edward's draft response, never sent. "What you fail to understand is that this technology was never developed for profit or power. It was created to solve the fundamental problem of clean, accessible energy for all people. Your threats merely confirm that I have made the right decision in declining your offers. I have taken steps to ensure this work will eventually reach those who will use it as intended, regardless of your interference. The final document in the folder was a court order dated 1987, declaring Edwards' research to be classified material relevant to national security interests and demanding the surrender of all prototypes, documentation, and research materials to federal authorities. Edward knew they were coming for everything, Michael said, understanding now why the inventor had hidden his work so carefully. He didn't just disappear. He went underground, literally, and he's been here all along waiting for the right people to find what he hid. A soft click from behind made them both turn. Standing at the base of the stairs was an elderly man with white hair and alert blue eyes watching them with an expression of quiet satisfaction. Despite his age easily in his late 80s, he stood straight and moved with deliberate precision. "You've done well to find this place," he said, his voice stronger than his years might suggest. "Better than I could have hoped, actually. You followed the markers in sequence, treated the technology with respect, and demonstrated remarkable problem-solving skills." He stepped forward, extending his hand. "Edward Blackwell, and you must be Michael and Noah Carter. Welcome to my real workshop." Noah stared in open amazement. "How do you know our names?" Edward smiled. "I've been watching your progress since the auction. I arranged for that property to be available precisely when you needed it, Michael. The back tax is the minimum bid, all designed to ensure someone like you could acquire it." Michael's mind reeled with questions. "You've been watching us. How so?" "Discreetly," Edward assured him. "Nothing invasive. I simply needed to be certain the right person found my work. When I saw how carefully you studied those first journal pages, how respectfully you handled the technical drawings, I knew I'd chosen correctly." He gestured around the laboratory. "This represents my life's work. Technology that could transform how we generate and use energy. But more importantly, it represents a choice about who controls that transformation. The big energy conglomerates want exclusive ownership. The military sees weapons potential. I see a way to provide clean, affordable power to everyone, regardless of wealth or geography." "But why us?" Michael asked. "Why not choose someone with the resources or connections to develop this properly?" Edward moved to the scale model Noah had found. "Because people with resources and connections are precisely the ones who would be corrupted by this technology's potential. I needed someone honest, someone practical, someone who understands the value of building something that lasts." He looked directly at Michael. "A skilled mechanic who can fix what's broken. A father teaching his son to build rather than just consume. Someone who would see this technology for what it truly is, not a path to wealth, but a tool for helping others." His gaze shifted to Noah. "And a boy with the curiosity and imagination to see possibilities where others see only problems. Together, you represent exactly the kind of stewardship I've been hoping to find." Michael struggled to process the implications. "But I don't have the scientific background to understand all of this, let alone develop it further or protect it from people who might want to take it." Edward smiled again. "You understand more than you think. Your mechanical intuition has already helped you grasp concepts that took me years to develop. And as for protection," he moved to another desk and retrieved a leather portfolio. "I've made certain arrangements over the decades, legal structures, financial resources, connections with people who share my vision. All of this is detailed here along with formal transfer documents that would make you the legal owner of everything I've created." Michael stared at the portfolio. "You want to give us your technology? Just like that?" "Not just like that," Edward corrected. "I've been watching you for months, even before the auction. I know about your struggle since Elizabeth's death. I know about your integrity at work, your dedication to Noah. I know you're someone who fixes things because they should work properly, not just to be paid. You're exactly the person that I've been waiting for." Noah looked up at the old inventor. "How long have you been hiding here, Mr. Edward?" Edward's expression softened. "A long time, young man. Since before your father was born. Living quietly, refining my work, waiting for the right moment. The world is finally ready for this technology now in a way it wasn't when I first developed it. The climate crisis has made renewable energy a necessity, not just an alternative." He turned to Michael again. "I'm offering you more than just technology. I've established a foundation with assets of approximately $5 million dedicated to developing and implementing these energy systems. The foundation would be yours to direct with the understanding that the primary mission is to bring this technology to communities that need it most. Michael felt overwhelmed. $5 million, I can't possibly... Edward raised a hand to interrupt. The money is merely a tool, not the point. The point is the technology and what it can do. Think of remote villages without reliable electricity. Think of communities devastated by natural disasters. Think of people struggling to pay utility bills while corporations post record profits. This technology could change all of that. He gestured around the laboratory. But I'm 87 years old. I need someone younger, someone with the energy and vision to carry this forward, someone who understands that true value isn't measured in dollars. His eyes met Michael's. I think that someone is you, Michael Carter. You and your son. The laboratory fell silent except for the soft hum of equipment. Michael looked at Noah, whose face showed a mixture of excitement and understanding beyond his years. Then he looked back at Edward Blackwell, the reclusive genius who had somehow chosen them for this extraordinary responsibility. Can we think about this? Michael asked. It's a lot to process. Edward nodded. Of course. Take the technical manual with you, study it, discuss it between yourselves. I've waited decades. I can wait a little longer for your decision. As they prepared to leave, Edward handed Michael a small device that resembled a key fob. This will grant you access to the laboratory anytime. The security system will recognize you now. Come back when you are ready to talk further. Michael accepted the device, still struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what they discovered and what they had been offered. One thing before you go, Edward added. You should know that Horizon Energy is still very much in business and still very interested in acquiring my technology. They have resources and influence I can't match. If you accept my offer, you'll need to be careful. They have ways of discovering things they shouldn't know about. Michael nodded solemnly. We'll be discreet, and thank you for trusting us with this. As they climbed the stairs back to the shed, Noah turned to Edward. Mr. Edward, did you really arrange for us to get the cabin? How could you know we'd even be at the auction? The old inventor smiled enigmatically. Sometimes, Noah, the right people appear exactly when they're needed most. I simply made sure the opportunity would be there when you arrived. This drive back to their apartment that evening was unusually quiet. Both father and son were absorbed in their thoughts, trying to process the extraordinary encounter and the decision that lay before them. Michael's mind raced with practical considerations: the responsibility of managing a $5 million foundation, the technical challenges of developing Edward's technology, the potential threats from corporations like Horizon Energy. But beneath these concerns lay a growing sense of purpose, unlike anything he'd felt since Elizabeth's death. Noah broke the silence as they approached the city limits. Dad, I think we should do it. I think we should help Mr. Edward. Michael glanced at his son. It's a huge responsibility, buddy, and potentially dangerous if what Edward said about Horizon is true. Noah nodded solemnly. I know, but that's why he needs us. His inventions could help so many people, and he's been waiting a really long time for someone he can trust. Michael couldn't help but smile at his son's simple clarity. When did you get so wise? Noah shrugged. Mom always said that when you can help someone, you should. Remember. Michael did remember. It had been one of Elizabeth's core beliefs that opportunities to make a difference should never be ignored, no matter how challenging they might seem. She'd be proud of you for thinking that way, he said softly. As they pulled into their apartment complex, Michael had already made his decision. The technical manual Edward had given them lay on the seat between them, hundreds of pages detailing a technology that could transform lives around the world. The cabin they'd purchased for $100 had led them to something far more valuable than property or even money. It had led them to purpose. Tomorrow they would return to the laboratory and accept Edward's offer. Together, the mechanic, the boy, and the aging inventor would embark on a journey none of them could have imagined, just weeks earlier. A journey that began with a desperate bid at a county auction and led to the possibility of changing the world. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cabin clearing as Michael and Noah made their way back to Edward's hidden laboratory. They had spent the night discussing the extraordinary offer, weighing the responsibilities against the potential to make a real difference in the world. By dawn, their decision was made. The secret door in the shed opened smoothly at the touch of Michael's new access device. As they descended the stairs, they found Edward at a workbench, carefully adjusting a component of his energy system. He looked up with a smile that suggested he already knew their answer. "You've decided," he said simply. Michael nodded. "We want to help. We want to continue what you've started." Edward's weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "I knew you would. There's something about the two of you, a fundamental decency that's become rare in this world." He gestured for them to join him at the central desk where legal documents had been arranged in neat stacks. "I've prepared everything transfer of intellectual property establishment of the Blackwell Foundation for Sustainable Energy Financial Accounts and introduction letters to my few trusted contacts in the renewable energy field." Noah looked up at the old inventor. "So we'll be making clean energy for people who can't afford regular electricity." Edward nodded. "That's the core mission, to provide energy independence to communities that have been overlooked or exploited by conventional power companies. Starting small with individual households and remote villages, then expanding as the technology proves itself." Michael examined the foundation documents, noting the careful legal framework Edward had constructed over decades. "You've thought of everything, but I'm still not clear on why you're willing to hand all this over to us. This is your life's work." Edward's expression grew solemn. "I'm 87 years old, Michael. I don't have the time left to see this through to completion. What I need now isn't ownership. It's the assurance that this technology will be used as intended to help those who need it most." He placed a hand on the foundation charter. "And yes, I've tried to think of everything. The legal structure makes the technology essentially unpatentable by anyone else. The Foundation's charter requires that the core technology remains open source while still protecting it from weaponization or monopolization. The financial resources are structured to be self-sustaining through limited commercial applications that fund the humanitarian work. The legal transfer, however, proved far more complex than any of them had anticipated. Edward had arranged for Margaret Chen, a specialized attorney in intellectual property law, to oversee the process. When she arrived the following day, her expression was grave as she spread documents across the laboratory's conference table. "Mr. Carter," she began, "I need you to understand that this isn't simply signing a few papers. The transfer we're undertaking has implications that reach far beyond normal property or patent rights." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. "I understand, or at least I'm beginning to." Margaret gestured to the stacks of documents. "We're dealing with multiple layers of legal protection. Edward has spent decades creating a structure that would shield his work from corporate or government seizure. Some patents were deliberately filed with key components omitted. Others were divided between different countries and jurisdictions. There are shell companies, blind trusts, and defensive publications designed to prevent anyone from monopolizing this technology." For the next 8 hours, they worked through the intricate legal maze Edward had constructed. Each document required careful explanation. Each signature transferred another piece of his life's work to Michael's guardianship. "This approach," Margaret explained, pointing to a particularly complex set of documents, "creates a legal firewall. If Horizon or any other entity attempts to claim ownership through one channel, they'll find themselves blocked by protections in another jurisdiction." Noah watched in fascination as the adults navigated the complicated legal terrain. Though only 9, he seemed to grasp the importance of what was happening. "It's like a puzzle," he said during a brief break. "Mr. Edward made a puzzle that only the right person could solve." Edward smiled at the boy. "That's exactly right, Noah. The law can be a weapon or a shield depending on how it's used. I've tried to make it a shield for this technology." The complexity of the transfer wasn't limited to intellectual property. The financial aspects required equal attention. The Blackwell Foundation's assets were distributed across multiple accounts and investment vehicles structured to be both secure and accessible for humanitarian purposes. This account, Margaret explained, showing Michael the relevant documentation, is dedicated to research and development. This one supports implementation in developing regions, and this one is specifically for emergency contingencies. Michael was overwhelmed by the scope of the Foundation's resources. The $5 million he'd been told about was only the beginning. There were research facilities in 3 countries, fabrication partnerships with specialized manufacturers, and training programs that had been quietly preparing technicians for years. Why so distributed? Michael asked. Wouldn't it be more efficient to centralize? Edward shook his head. Centralization creates vulnerability. If Horizon or similar entities targeted one aspect of our operation, the entire mission could be compromised. Distributed resources mean distributed resilience. By evening, the process was complete. Michael's hand was cramped from signing hundreds of documents, but the transfer was legally binding. Edward handed him a small safe deposit box key. The final piece, he said. This opens box 743 at First National Bank. Inside, you'll find duplicates of all essential documentation, emergency funds, and instructions for worst-case scenarios. As Margaret packed away the completed paperwork, she offered a final warning. Be vigilant, Mr. Carter. Horizon Energy has been pursuing this technology for decades. They have resources, political connections, and legal teams that make them formidable opponents. They will come for you probably sooner rather than later. Michael looked at Noah, then back to Edward and Margaret. Let them come. We'll be ready. The warning proved prescient. Just 3 days later, Michael and Noah were working on the cabin's roof when an unmarked drone buzzed overhead, hovering long enough to capture detailed images before speeding away. When Michael reported the incident to Edward, the old inventor seemed unsurprised. They're conducting preliminary surveillance, he explained. Horizon maintains a global network for detecting unusual energy signatures. Our recent testing would have triggered their attention, and the property transfer would have raised additional flags. The first encounter was subtle, a black SUV driving slowly past the property entrance, its tinted windows revealing nothing about the occupants. 2 days later, a utility van parked at the road junction for hours, ostensibly checking local power lines, but positioned perfectly to observe comings and goings from their property. Then came the digital intrusions. Their internet connection began experiencing unexplained disruptions. Strange emails arrived containing seemingly innocent attachments that Edward immediately identified as sophisticated monitoring software. Anonymous phone calls came at odd hours, hanging up when answered. What's our next move? Michael asked. Edward's expression was determined. We accelerate our timeline. They won't move against us immediately. They'll gather intelligence first, perhaps try legal maneuvers or financial pressure, but we need to establish a defensible position quickly. Over the next 2 weeks, they implemented Edward's security protocols. Surveillance cameras disguised as natural features were installed around the property perimeter. The laboratory's energy emissions were shielded using specialized equipment. Communication systems were secured with military-grade encryption. Meanwhile, Michael began the process of establishing the Foundation's operational framework. Following Edward's guidance, he reached out to a carefully vetted list of potential team members, engineers, scientists, and technicians who shared their vision of energy as a human right rather than a commodity. The first to join was Dr. James Wilson, a material scientist who had collaborated briefly with Edward in the 1970s before corporate pressure forced them apart. Now retired from university research, Dr. Wilson brought valuable expertise in the specialized components that made Edward's system so efficient. I always regretted walking away back then, Dr. Wilson confided to Michael after joining the team. Corporate pressure was intense. They threatened my funding, my tenure, even my family. Edward understood why I left, but I've carried the guilt for decades. Elena Vasquez came next, a brilliant young engineer who had spent 5 years developing small-scale renewable energy systems for remote communities in South America. Her practical experience with implementation would be crucial as they move from prototype to real-world application. When you've seen the children unable to study after sunset because electricity is too expensive, Elena explained during her introduction, you understand that energy isn't just about convenience. It's about opportunity, about futures being shaped or limited. Robert Chen, a former military electronics specialist with expertise in secure communications and electromagnetic shielding, joined to oversee security operations. His skeptical nature and attention to detail made him perfect for anticipating Horizon tactics. They're already mapping your daily routines, Chen warned after conducting his first security assessment. And they'll identify patterns, vulnerabilities, points of access. We need to become unpredictable while maintaining vigilance. The Foundation's team grew carefully, each new member thoroughly vetted and brought on board only after demonstrating their commitment to the mission. By the end of the first month, they had assembled a core group of 7 experts working from the expanded laboratory facilities. Michael resigned from Davidson's auto repair, explaining to his surprised boss that he had come into an unexpected opportunity. Frank Davidson wished him well but seemed puzzled by the sudden change. "You sure about this, Michael?" he asked. "You've been through a lot since Elizabeth passed. Big changes aren't always the answer." Michael appreciated the concern, but remained resolute. "This is different, Frank. For the first time since we lost Elizabeth, I feel like I'm doing something that matters, something that would make her proud." Noah, too, faced a transition as Michael enrolled him in a homeschooling program that would allow them to live full-time at the cabin while continuing his education. The boy adapted quickly, thriving in an environment where learning was directly connected to the foundation's practical work. The cabin renovation accelerated with foundation funds. Michael hired local contractors for the basic structural work, new roof, repaired foundation, updated wiring and plumbing, but was careful to maintain the building's rustic appearance. The real improvements happened below ground, where Edward directed the installation of specialized equipment to shield the laboratory's energy signatures from detection. Their first major technical challenge emerged when they attempted to scale Edward's prototype for real-world deployment. The laboratory version had been handcrafted with meticulous precision, but a deployable system needed to be robust enough to withstand harsh conditions and simple enough for local technicians to maintain. Elena attacked this problem, directly redesigning the system's interface and creating detailed illustrated maintenance guides that could be understood even by those with minimal technical training. Dr. Wilson focused on improving component durability, developing weather-resistant casings, and simplified connection systems. "The materials are the critical challenge," Dr. Wilson explained during one team meeting. Edward's original designs used rare earth elements in specific configurations. "We need alternatives that are more widely available without sacrificing efficiency." Michael's mechanical expertise proved invaluable during this process. His years of practical experience as an auto mechanic gave him insights into making complex systems user-friendly and serviceable, considerations that academic engineers sometimes overlooked. "People in remote villages can't call tech support," he reminded the team. "If it breaks and they can't fix it with basic tools and clear instructions, then we failed." Noah, too, made surprising contributions. His fresh perspective and natural creativity led to several interface improvements that made the system more intuitive to operate. One evening after Noah had gone to bed, Edward confided in Michael. "That boy has a remarkable mind," he said. "He sees connections that others misapproaches problems without the constraints of conventional thinking. He reminds me of myself at that age." Michael smiled with pride. "He's always been that way. Elizabeth used to say he had an old soul in a young body." As the Foundation's work progressed, so did Horizon Energy's interest in their activities. Their surveillance became increasingly obvious, vehicles parked near the property line, drones making regular flyovers, strangers in town asking questions about the new owners of the old Blackwell place. Then came a more direct approach. Michael returned from a supply run to find a sleek black car parked in their clearing and a well-dressed man waiting on the cabin porch. "Mr. Carter," the man said, extending his hand. "James Prescott, Vice President of Research Acquisitions at Horizon Energy. I hope I'm not intruding." Michael kept his expression neutral as he shook the offered hand. "What can I do for you, Mr. Prescott?" The executive's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'll be direct, Mr. Carter. Our company has been tracking energy innovations in this region for many years. Our sensors have detected unusual power signatures from this property, signatures consistent with advanced energy amplification technology." Michael maintained his composure. "I'm not sure what you're talking about. We're just fixing up an old cabin." Prescott's smile tightened. "Mr. Carter, Horizon Energy is prepared to make a very generous offer for any unusual technology you may have discovered on this property. We specialize in developing and commercializing innovative energy solutions." "Not interested," Michael said flatly. Prescott pulled a business card from his jacket pocket. $5 million, Mr. Carter. No questions asked. That's our opening offer for whatever you found here." Michael didn't take the card. "This is private property, Mr. Prescott. I think it's time for you to leave." The executive's pleasant demeanor cooled. "Consider carefully, Mr. Carter. Horizon has resources and influence you can't imagine. Working with us would be considerably easier than working against us. After Prescott departed, Michael went immediately to the laboratory where Edward and the team had been monitoring the encounter through hidden cameras. $5 million, Dr. Wilson mused. That confirms they don't know exactly what we have. If they did, they'd have offered 10 times that amount. Edward nodded in agreement. They're phishing testing your response, but this marks a new phase. They'll escalate now: legal pressure, regulatory harassment, perhaps more direct intervention. Elena looked concerned. We should accelerate the Alaska project. Once the technology is deployed and functioning, it becomes much harder for them to suppress. The Alaska project was their first planned implementation, a remote fishing village, where electricity costs consume nearly 40% of the average household income due to dependence on diesel generators. The foundation had been working with community leaders to prepare for installing a complete IRES system that would provide clean, reliable power at a fraction of the current cost. What makes Alaska so strategic? Michael asked. Edward spread a map across the conference table. Several factors. First, extreme conditions. If the system works reliably through an Alaskan winter, it demonstrates robustness. Second, isolation. These communities are perfect examples of those overlooked by conventional energy infrastructure. Third, visibility. Success there will attract attention from similar communities worldwide. The team accelerated preparations, working around the clock to finalize the Alaska prototype, while simultaneously strengthening their security measures. The installation team, led by Elena, would depart in 10 days, assuming Horizon didn't make a more aggressive move before then. The following weeks proved Edward right about escalation. Strange vehicles appeared near their property at odd hours. Their internet connection suffered unexplained disruptions. Local officials suddenly discovered concerns about their building permits and zoning compliance. The building inspector, who arrived unannounced, was clearly uncomfortable with his assignment. "Look, Mr. Carter," he confided after completing his inspection, "I got a call from someone high up in the county administration. They wanted me to find violations. Any violations. I'm just doing my job, but something doesn't feel right about this." Michael appreciated the honesty. "I understand you're caught in the middle. We'll address any legitimate concerns you have identified." Most alarmingly, Noah reported being approached by a friendly stranger while waiting for the school bus, a man who asked casual questions about his father's work at their cabin in the woods. "He seemed really interested in what you do, Dad," Noah explained. "Asked if you were building anything special at the cabin. I remembered what Mr. Edwards said about keeping secrets, so I just told him that you fix cars." "That crosses the line," Michael said furiously. "They're involving a child now." Edward placed a calming hand on Michael's shoulder. "This is precisely why I developed Protocol Omega. We need to implement it now." Protocol Omega, Edward explained to the full team, was his ultimate failsafe, a comprehensive strategy developed over decades to protect his work from corporate or government seizure. It involves simultaneously deploying the technology in multiple locations worldwide, releasing key technical documentation through secure channels to selected universities and nonprofit organizations, and activating a network of supporters in strategic positions. Once Protocol Omega is initiated, the technology can't be contained, Edward said. It becomes too widespread, too public to suppress. The genie leaves the bottle permanently. Michael was initially skeptical. Can we really deploy that many systems that quickly? We've barely finished the Alaska prototype. Edward smiled. I've been preparing for this day for 20 years, Michael. The Foundation's $5 million isn't just sitting in bank accounts. I've established fabrication facilities, training programs, and implementation partnerships in 12 countries. They've been manufacturing components and training technicians for years, waiting for the activation signal. He pulled up a secure database on the laboratory's main computer, revealing a global network of collaborators, small manufacturing facilities disguised as conventional electronics shops, training programs embedded within local technical schools, community partners in strategic locations across 6 continents. The display showed 20 locations where systems were already pre-positioned, awaiting only final assembly and activation. The communities range from fishing villages in Alaska to tribal areas in Africa, mountain settlements in the Andes, to island communities in Southeast Asia. All these years, Edward explained, I've been identifying the perfect demonstration, sites placed where the need is greatest, where conventional energy infrastructure has failed or never arrived where success would be most visible. The team worked around the clock finalizing preparations. The Alaska prototype was completed and shipped with Elena to oversee installation. Similar systems were dispatched to rural communities in Maine, Appalachia, and the Southwest, as well as to villages in Africa, Asia, and South America. Technical documentation was prepared in multiple languages with simplified manuals for local technicians and more detailed materials for engineering schools and research institutions. These would be released simultaneously through secure channels once the systems were operational. As they neared readiness, Horizon pressure tactics intensified. Legal notices arrived alleging patent infringement. Tax authorities suddenly discovered irregularities in the Foundation's filings. Even their utilities began experiencing mysterious disruptions. Robert Chen discovered sophisticated surveillance devices around the property perimeter and evidence of attempted cyber intrusions into their secure network. Most concerning of all, he identified what appeared to be preparations for a more direct approach. Horizon security personnel conducting reconnaissance of the property from concealed positions in the surrounding forest. They're planning something significant, Chen warned after one perimeter sweep. Professional equipment, military-style deployment pattern. This isn't corporate espionage anymore. It's an operation. The breaking point came when Michael discovered clear evidence of intrusion at the laboratory entrance, subtle but unmistakable signs that someone had attempted to breach their security during the night. That evening, Edward gathered the entire team for a critical decision. "We have two choices," he said gravely. "We can continue trying to operate under this increasing pressure, or we can launch Protocol Omega immediately before we're fully prepared. Neither option is ideal, but I believe we've run out of time." Dr. Wilson spoke first. "The core technology is ready. We've confirmed functionality in all test scenarios. What we lack is the support infrastructure, comprehensive training materials, maintenance protocols, implementation guidelines." Elena, joining via secure video link from Alaska, reported that their first installation was nearly complete and functioning within expected parameters. "The villagers here already understand the basics of operation and maintenance," she said. "They're quick learners, especially when it means cutting their energy costs by 70%. Michael considered all perspectives carefully. As Foundation Director, the final decision was his to make. "We launch Protocol Omega," he decided. "Better to move forward with what we have than risk losing everything to Horizon." The next 72 hours were a carefully orchestrated whirlwind of activity. The activation signal went out to implementation teams worldwide. Technical documentation was transmitted to selected recipients in academia and nonprofit energy organizations. A strategic press release was prepared revealing the existence of the technology without disclosing the critical details that would allow replication without proper oversight. Edward worked the secure communications system, tirelessly contacting partners he hadn't spoken with in years, professors at engineering schools who had quietly incorporated his principles into their teaching community, while organizers who had prepared their villages for eventual installation, former colleagues who had maintained discrete fabrication capabilities. Michael coordinated the final assembly teams, ensuring each deployment site received the necessary components and expertise. Dr. Wilson supervised the preparation of technical documentation, striking the delicate balance between providing enough information for legitimate implementation while protecting against weaponization or monopolization. Noah helped wherever he could, organizing shipments, preparing instructional diagrams, even creating simple animated tutorials that could transcend language barriers for maintenance procedures. The activation countdown reached its final hours. Reports from field teams confirmed readiness at 18 of the 20 deployment sites. The remaining 2 had encountered logistical challenges, but expected to be operational within days. Then, as they reached the 24-hour mark before simultaneous activation, Michael received an alert from their perimeter security system. Vehicles were approaching multiple black SUVs, moving with purposeful speed. Within minutes, the clearing in front of the cabin filled with Horizon personnel and what appeared to be federal agents. A helicopter circled overhead, its downdraft bending the treetops. From the lead vehicle emerged a woman in an impeccable business suit, Victoria Harlow, CEO of Horizon Energy herself. She approached the cabin with the confident stride of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. Michael met her at the porch steps, his earlier anxiety replaced by a calm determination. "Mr. Carter," Harlow began without preamble, I have a federal warrant authorizing the seizure of unauthorized energy technology from these premises. Please step aside. Michael didn't move. On what grounds? Harlow's smile was cold. National security concerns regarding unregulated power generation technology. The warrant covers all equipment, documentation, and prototypes developed by Edward Blackwell or derived from his work. She handed him an official-looking document, which Michael examined carefully before speaking. Ms. Harlow, I think you'll find your timing extremely unfortunate. He gestured to Noah, who stood in the cabin doorway holding a tablet. Would you like to see what's happening right now in Alaska? Or perhaps in rural Kenya? Maybe the village in Peru would interest you more. Noah turned the tablet to display a live stream showing the activation of an IREAS unit in a remote Alaskan community. Local residents gathered around as the system powered up, bringing light to homes that had struggled with expensive, unreliable electricity for generations. Similar scenes played out in locations across the globe, and all else happening simultaneously, all being documented by local media and international observers. What is this? Harlow demanded, her composure slipping. We call it Protocol Omega, came Edward's voice as he emerged from the cabin to stand beside Michael and Noah. The simultaneous worldwide deployment of the Integrated Renewable Energy Amplification System. At this moment, 18 functional units are coming online in communities across 6 continents. Harlow's face paled. You're bluffing. You couldn't possibly have deployed so many systems so quickly. Edward smiled. I've been preparing for this day for 20 years, Ms. Harlow. While you were focused on acquiring the technology, I was focused on sharing it with those who need it most. He gestured to one of the federal agents. I believe if you check the news, you'll find that the technology you're seeking under national security concerns is now being publicly demonstrated worldwide. It can hardly be classified as secret when communities from Alaska to Zimbabwe are using it openly. The agent consulted his phone, scrolling through breaking news stories with growing concern. Ms. Harlow, he said quietly, there are reports coming in from multiple sources. The technology appears to be widely deployed already. The warrant specifies unregistered classified technology, a second agent added. If this system is already in public use internationally, Victoria Harlow's carefully composed demeanor cracked. This isn't over, Blackwell. Horizon will still find a way to control this market. Edward shook his head. There is no market to control, Ms. Harlow. That's what your corporation never understood. The IREAS technology isn't a product to sell. It's a resource to share. The Foundation's charter ensures it remains open source, available to anyone who needs it, protected only from weaponization and monopolization. He gestured toward Michael and Noah, and now it has guardians who will carry that mission forward long after I'm gone. The federal agents, confronted with the public nature of the technology and growing uncertain about the legitimacy of their warrant, ultimately departed without conducting a search. Victoria Harlow left with them, her defeat evident in every rigid line of her posture. As the dust settled from Protocol Omega's implementation, the Blackwell Foundation entered a new phase. With the technology now public, their focus shifted to education, implementation, support, and continued refinement of the systems. Reports began flowing in from the deployment sites. In Alaska, the fishing village saw immediate energy cost reductions of over 70%, with the IRES system functioning perfectly despite harsh weather conditions. In Kenya, a community that had never had reliable electricity now powered its school and medical clinic around the clock. In Peru, a remote mountain village finally had consistent energy for refrigeration and communication systems. The global response was immediate and overwhelming. News organizations covered the story as a technological breakthrough. Communities similar to those in the initial deployment began reaching out to the foundation, seeking their own installations. Universities requested more detailed technical information for research and educational purposes. Horizon Energy, meanwhile, faced a corporate crisis. Their stock value plummeted as investors recognized that their business model, based on controlling and commodifying energy, was fundamentally threatened by the widespread availability of Edwards technology. Victoria Harlow resigned under pressure, and the company began a desperate pivot toward adapting rather than opposing the new energy paradigm. 3 months after the confrontation, Michael found himself testifying before a congressional committee on renewable energy policy. The foundation's work had gained such prominence that policymakers were being forced to reconsider regulatory frameworks that had long favored traditional energy corporations. The transition won't happen overnight, Michael explained to the committee. Conventional energy systems will remain necessary for decades, but the IRES technology offers an alternative path, one that empowers communities, rather than making them dependent on centralized power generation and distribution. When questioned about the economic impact on the existing energy sector, Michael was straightforward. Change is inevitable and sometimes painful, but the fossil fuel industry has had a century to prepare for this transition. The IRES technology simply accelerates a process that climate reality was already forcing. Back at the cabin, the foundation's work continued at an accelerating pace. The original team of 7 had grown to 30 full-time staff coordinating projects on every continent. The modest laboratory beneath the shed had expanded into a comprehensive research and development facility, though still carefully disguised to maintain the property's unassuming appearance. Edward, now approaching his 88th birthday, had stepped back from day-to-day operations but remained active as an advisor and mentor at OR. His relationship with Noah had deepened into a grandfatherly bond, the old inventor delighting in the boy's quick mind and creative approaches to technical problems. 1 year after Michael's desperate bid at the county auction, he stood on the porch of their fully restored cabin, watching as Noah helped Edward adjust one of the discrete solar collectors integrated into the roof design. The property had been transformed not into a showcase of wealth, but into a working demonstration of sustainable living. Dr. Wilson joined Michael on the porch, handing him a steaming mug of coffee. "Have you seen the news?" he asked. "Horizon has announced a new division focused on IRES-compatible storage systems. If you can't beat them, join them, I suppose." Michael nodded. "They'll adapt. The transition will take decades, and there's still plenty of profit in supporting and enhancing these systems rather than controlling them." Wilson smiled. "You've accomplished something remarkable here, Michael. In just 1 year, you've gone from struggling to pay rent to changing the global energy landscape." Michael shook his head. "I just happened to be the right person in the right place. Edward did the hard work, decades of research development planning." "Perhaps," Wilson acknowledged, "but it took your particular combination of practical skills and ethical compass to actually implement his vision. Don't underestimate what you've contributed." They watched as Noah excitedly showed Edward a modification he'd designed for the monitoring system, a simplified interface that would make maintenance easier for non-technical users. The boy had thrived in the midst of the foundation's work, his natural creativity finding perfect expression in solving practical problems. "He's going to surpass both of us someday," Edward had told Michael recently. "He has your mechanical intuition and my theoretical curiosity without either of our limitations." As the sun set over their property, Michael reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a desperate $100 bid at a county auction. They had found not just a home, but a purpose, a way to honor Elizabeth's memory by making a genuine difference in the world. The cabin that had once seemed like a broken-down last resort had become the headquarters for a quiet revolution in energy accessibility. The foundation's work would continue for generations, guided by the principles Edward had established and the practical approach Michael had implemented. Noah joined his father on the porch, his face flushed with excitement. "Dad, the Alaska team just reported that 3 neighboring villages want to install systems before winter. They saw how well ours worked through last year's storms. Can we go help?" Michael smiled, putting his arm around his son's shoulders. "I think that could be arranged. It would be good to see it firsthand, wouldn't it?" Edward joined them, moving more slowly these days, but still sharp of mind and purpose. "The first installation is always the hardest," he said. "Once people see the system working, see their neighbors with reliable, affordable power, the technology sells itself, or rather shares itself." The 3 of them stood together as twilight deepened, their cabin glowing with light, powered by the very technology they were sharing with the world, proof that even the most broken places could be transformed with the right combination of vision, skill, and heart. In the distance, the lights of the nearest town twinkled like earthbound stars. Soon Michael knew those lights would be powered by the same technology illuminating their cabin. Not because it was mandated or marketed, but because it simply made more sense for communities to generate clean, affordable energy than to remain dependent on costly, polluting alternatives. The revolution they had launched wouldn't make headlines every day. It would spread quietly from village to village, community to community, as people recognized the practical benefits of energy independence. And it had all begun with a father's desperate attempt to provide his son with a home, a broken cabin, purchased for $100, that turned out to contain a $5 million legacy and the potential to change the world. As Noah chattered excitedly about their upcoming Alaska trip, Michael caught Edward's eye. The old inventor nodded slightly, a gesture of satisfaction and approval. They had done it, protected his life's work, and ensured it would benefit those who needed it most. The cabin had indeed held treasure beyond imagination, but the greatest treasure had been the opportunity to transform their own broken lives into something that could help repair brokenness in the wider world. 5 years after Protocol Omega, the legacy cabin stood as a living testament to the power of innovation guided by conscience. What had begun as a desperate purchase had evolved into the heart of a global movement, transforming energy access for millions. But for Michael, Noah, and Edward, the journey continued to unfold in ways none could have predicted. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the day they'd first discovered the cabin, a sleek private jet touched down at the small regional airport nearest their property. From it emerged representatives from the United Nations Sustainable Development Council, come to witness firsthand the technology that had begun reshaping energy infrastructure in over 60 countries. Michael greeted them at the cabin, now the centerpiece of a modest campus of research buildings and training facilities, all designed to blend harmoniously with the surrounding forest. Edward's philosophy of unobtrusive development had guided every expansion, ensuring their growing operation remained true to its roots. The UN delegation included energy ministers from developing nations, technical advisors, and humanitarian coordinators. As Michael led them through the facilities, he couldn't help reflecting on how far they'd come. The Blackwell Foundation now employed over 200 people worldwide, coordinated thousands of installations annually, and had training centers on 4 continents. Most remarkable was that each community that received an IRES system became not just a beneficiary but a partner. Local residents trained to maintain their systems would then help neighboring communities implement their own. The technology spread organically, a self-replicating ecosystem of energy independence. In the main conference room, once Edward's underground laboratory, Noah, now 14, was presenting his latest innovation to the Foundation's engineering team. Over the past 5 years, the boy's natural talent had blossomed under Edward's mentorship. He had redesigned the IRES interface to be even more intuitive, developed simplified maintenance protocols, and most recently created a diagnostic system that could be operated by anyone with minimal training. The UN delegates watched in amazement as the teenager confidently explained complex technical concepts, answering their questions with the ease of someone who had lived and breathed this technology for years. Michael felt a surge of pride watching his son. No longer the quiet, careful child protecting his father from disappointment, but a confident young man growing into his own unique potential. Edward, now in his 90s but still remarkably sharp, joined them for the afternoon session. Though he moved more slowly and relied on a walking stick, his mind remained as agile as ever. The old inventor had lived to see his life's work spread across the globe, transforming countless lives, just as he had envisioned decades earlier when he'd first begun hiding his discoveries around the property. After the formal presentations, as the delegates toured the practical demonstrations, Edward pulled Michael aside. "Did you see the news from Horizon this morning?" he asked, his voice quieter, but still carrying that characteristic mix of intellect and mischief. Michael nodded. After years of fighting against the technology, Horizon Energy had finally announced the complete restructuring of its business model. No longer focused on controlling energy production and distribution, the corporation was repositioning itself as a facilitator of energy independence, offering support services and enhancements for community-based systems like those developed by the Blackwell Foundation. Victoria Harlow's replacement as CEO had publicly acknowledged that the centralized energy model was becoming obsolete in a world where communities could generate and manage their own clean power. It was the corporate equivalent of surrendering to the inevitable. "They didn't beat us, so they're finally joining us," Michael observed. Edward smiled. They had no choice. The economics became undeniable when villages in Africa and South America started producing surplus energy that they could share with neighboring communities. The writing was on the wall. You can't monopolize what people can create for themselves. That evening, after the delegation had departed, the three generations of the Blackwell Foundation's leadership gathered on the cabin porch, the same porch where Michael and Noah had first opened the strongbox containing Edward's map 5 years earlier. Der Wilson joined them, bringing a bottle of champagne to celebrate the UN's commitment to fund 10,000 new IREA's installations in regions suffering from energy poverty. Elena arrived from the airport, fresh from overseeing the Foundation's first large-scale urban implementation in Southeast Asia. The core team that had launched Protocol Omega was reunited, older and wiser, but still driven by the same vision. As twilight settled over the clearing, Noah raised an unexpected question. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if someone else had bought this cabin? If Dad hadn't been at that auction that day? Edward looked at the young man thoughtfully. I've asked myself that many times over the years. Was it chance that brought your father to that auction? Or something more deliberate? I'd been watching the property for years, waiting for the right person to appear. I saw many potential buyers come and go, people with far more resources than your father, but none with the right combination of character and capability. Michael smiled, remembering the desperate man he'd been 5 years ago, willing to risk his last dollars on a broken-down cabin because he couldn't bear to see the hope fade from his son's eyes again. I was just trying to give Noah a home, he said simply. Everything else, the technology, the foundation, the global impact, that all came later. Maybe that's exactly why it worked, Elena suggested. You weren't looking for treasure or power or recognition. You just wanted to build something meaningful for your son. Edward nodded. The world is full of brilliant minds creating extraordinary technology, but without the right guidance, that brilliance often serves the wrong purposes. Profit over people, control over liberation, complexity over accessibility. What this technology needed wasn't just development, but direction, a moral compass to ensure it served those who needed it most. He placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. And now it has not just one generation of guardians, but two. Whatever happens next, the work will continue. The following morning brought news that shocked even Edward. Horizon Energy had filed a new lawsuit not against the Blackwell Foundation this time, but against a shadow corporation called Global Resource Technologies. The lawsuit alleged that GRT had been attempting to weaponize modified versions of the IRES technology, secretly developing systems that could remotely disrupt power grids or concentrate energy for destructive purposes. This is unexpected, Edward said, studying the news reports. Horizon actually helping us protect the technology from misuse. Maybe they've genuinely changed, Michael suggested, but the skepticism in his voice was clear. Robert Chen, still heading their security operations, was more direct. Or they're positioning themselves as guardians of the technology they once tried to steal. A public relations move to rebuild their image. Whatever Horizon's motives, the lawsuit had exposed a genuine threat. GRT was linked to several defense contractors, and evidence suggested they had been working on weaponized applications for nearly 2 years. We need to address this immediately, Michael decided. We can't allow the technology to be perverted into something destructive. The Foundation implemented an emergency response plan, dispatching teams to audit all existing installations and update security protocols. Noah, drawing on his deep understanding of the system architecture, developed a safety override that could be remotely deployed to all IRES units, preventing them from being modified for harmful applications. The crisis brought unexpected allies. Universities, energy cooperatives, and even reformed energy corporations joined the effort to protect the technology's integrity. Most surprising, there was a call from Victoria Harlow herself, now retired but still influential. Mr. Carter, we've had our differences, she said without preamble when Michael answered the phone. But I never wanted Edward's work to become a weapon. I've compiled information on GRT's operations that might help you. My contacts tell me they're planning something significant within the next 72 hours. Why should I trust you? Michael asked. Her answer was unexpected in its candor. Because I was wrong. I saw Edward's technology purely in terms of market dominance and profit. It took me years to understand what he truly created, not just a better way to generate power, but a better way to distribute control. I'm trying to correct my mistakes. The information she provided proved accurate. GRT had established a clandestine testing facility in a remote desert location where they were preparing to demonstrate a weaponized energy projector to potential military buyers. The system used corrupted IREA's principles to concentrate energy into a directed beam capable of disabling electronic systems, or worse. This is the scenario I feared most, Edward confessed as they reviewed satellite imagery of the facility. Energy that should light homes and power schools being twisted into something that destroys. Michael faced the most difficult decision of his tenure as foundation director. Exposing GRT would bring unwanted attention to the dark potential of the technology. Allowing them to proceed could lead to devastating applications. Moving against them directly risked confrontation with powerful defense interests. Noah, who had been quietly studying the facility schematics, offered an unexpected solution. "We don't need to attack them or expose them," he said. "We just need to make their demonstration fail." His plan was elegant in its simplicity. The weaponized system still relied on the core IREA's architecture, including the energy amplification principles Edward had developed. The safety override Noah had created could be adapted to target specifically this misuse of the technology. "It's like a vaccine," Noah explained. "We introduce a harmless modification to all legitimate IRES systems that makes them immune to weaponization, and we remotely deploy a disruptor signal that will cause any weaponized version to safely shut down during demonstration." The plan required precise timing and technical expertise beyond even what the Foundation possessed. They would need help from the global network of IRES operators and engineers, the same community that had made Protocol Omega possible 5 years earlier. Edwards sent out the call through secure channels established during the original deployment. Within hours, responses began flowing in from around the world: engineers in remote villages, technicians in urban centers, university, researchers who had studied the technology, all volunteering their expertise and local resources for what became known as Protocol Sentinel. Working around the clock, the global team implemented NOAA's safety modifications, creating a distributed defense network that would protect the technology from perversion. The disruptor signal was engineered to affect only systems operating outside the parameters of the Foundation's ethical guidelines. On the day of GRT's scheduled demonstration, Michael, Edward, and Noah gathered in the Foundation's Operations Center, monitoring feeds from cooperating satellites and remote sensors. Representatives from legitimate government agencies, quietly supportive of their efforts, provided additional intelligence. The demonstration began precisely at noon. Military officials and potential buyers gathered at the desert facility as GRT executives proudly unveiled their energy projection system. The modified IREAS array powered up, drawing energy from solar collectors and storage units based on Edwards' original designs. But as the system reached 60% capacity, indicators began flashing red. The safety protocols Noah had designed activated, automatically detecting the weaponized configuration and initiating a controlled shutdown. On monitors around the world, Foundation teams watched as the GRT executives frantically tried to override the safeguards, only to find their system completely unresponsive. "It worked," Noah whispered, watching the chaotic scene unfold. Edward squeezed his shoulder. "Of course it did. You understood the technology at its deepest level, not just how it functions, but why it was created." They never could. The fallout was swift and severe for GRT. Their demonstration failure in front of military officials led to investigations that uncovered illegal activities extending far beyond the weaponization attempt. The corporation collapsed under federal indictments and international sanctions. More importantly, the crisis catalyzed a global agreement on ethical energy technology. The United Nations, building on the Foundation's work, established the Clean Energy Ethics Accord, a framework ensuring that renewable energy innovations would be developed and deployed for humanitarian benefit rather than profit or power. As winter approached, the forest surrounding the legacy cabin turned golden and crimson. Michael stood on the ridge where they had found the first marker 5 years earlier, gazing out over the valley, now dotted with communities utilizing ARES systems. The transformation was remarkable, not just in the physical infrastructure, but in the way people related to energy and to each other. Villages that had once competed for scarce resources now shared energy knowledge and maintenance expertise. Communities that had been dependent on distant corporations now controlled their own power generation. Schools operated day and night, clinics kept medicines refrigerated, small businesses flourished with reliable electricity. The sound of footsteps on fallen leaves announced Noah's arrival. Thought I'd find you up here, the teenager said, joining his father at the ridge overlook. Edward's looking for you. The Alaska team just reported their 100th installation. Michael smiled. I'll be down in a minute. Just wanted to see the view one more time before the snow comes. Noah stood silently beside him, tall enough now that his shoulder nearly reached his father's. At 14, he was showing signs of the man he would become, thoughtful, creative, with an engineer's mind and an artist's vision. Dad, he said after a moment, remember that first night when we found the cabin, when I said it felt like the place had been waiting for us? I remember. I still feel that way, like we were meant to find it. Not just because of Edward's technology or the foundation, but because it brought us back to life after Mom died. It gave us purpose. Michael put his arm around his son's shoulders. Your mother would be so proud of you, Noah, not just for the technical achievements, but for the way you focused on helping others. They made their way back down the trail toward the cabin where Edward waited on the porch. Despite his advanced age, the inventor insisted on spending time outdoors every day, watching the seasons change around the home he had built so long ago. There you are, he called as they approached. I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost in your own woods. Just taking in the view, Michael replied, joining him on the porch. Noah tells me we've reached 100 installations in Alaska. Edward nodded, his eyes bright with satisfaction, and thousands more worldwide. But numbers don't tell the real story. Elena sent video from a village in Guatemala where they're using excess power to pump clean water for the first time. Children who spent hours each day carrying water can now attend school instead. The three generations sat together as evening approached, discussing the Foundation's next initiatives. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Wilson, who hurried up the path with uncharacteristic excitement. You need to see this, he said, handing Michael a tablet displaying a news feed. The Nobel Committee just announced this year's Peace Prize. Michael read the headline, then looked up in astonishment. They have awarded it to the Blackwell Foundation, to all of us. Edward waved his hand dismissively. Prizes are meaningless. The real reward is seeing the technology used as intended. But it's not just for the technology, Dr. Wilson insisted. It's for creating a new model of development technology that empowers rather than exploits, that distributes control rather than centralizing it. They're calling it a paradigm shift in how innovations reach those who need them most. Later that evening, after the excitement had settled and the team had dispersed to their various duties, Michael found Edward alone in the laboratory studying the original drawings that had started everything. You never wanted recognition, did you? Michael asked. All those years hiding your work, you could have been famous wealthy. Edward looked up from the faded diagrams. Fame feeds the ego, Michael. Wealth feeds the bank account. Neither feeds the soul. What nourishes the spirit is knowing you have used your gifts to ease suffering, to create something that leaves the world better than you found it. He carefully rolled up the drawings, placing them in a metal tube similar to those they had found at the markers years ago. I want you to have these, he said, handing the tube to Michael. The originals. They belong with you and Noah now. Edward, these should be in a museum or university archive. They're historical documents. The old inventor shook his head. They're tools, not relics. Keep them active. Keep them evolving. The work is never finished. As Michael accepted the tube, he realized Edward was entrusting him with more than paper and ink. He was passing on a legacy of purpose that extended far beyond technology, a vision of innovation guided by compassion rather than competition, by service rather than self-interest. The Nobel announcement brought renewed media attention to the Blackwell Foundation and its work. Journalists descended on the small town nearest their property, eager for interviews and footage of the revolutionary energy system changing lives worldwide. Michael handled most of the public relations, shielding Edward from the spotlight he had avoided for decades and protecting Noah from excessive attention that might disrupt his education and development. One persistent reporter finally managed to corner Edward during a rare trip into town. Her question was simple but penetrating. Doctor, I was screaming. Blackwell, you spent decades in hiding, protecting your technology from those who would misuse it. What convinced you to finally share it with the world? Edward gazed thoughtfully at the distant ridge where his cabin stood. I didn't share it with the world, he corrected gently. I shared it with a father and son who had lost nearly everything but still found room in their hearts to care about others. They shared it with the world. This philosophy of thoughtful stewardship rather than ownership became the Foundation's guiding principle as they navigated the challenges of global expansion. When governments sought exclusive licenses, when corporations proposed centralized implementations, when military agencies suggested dual-use applications, the answer was always the same. The technology belongs to those who need it most. A milestone came on the 5th anniversary of Protocol Omega. The Foundation organized a global celebration connecting all IREA's communities through a live video network. On screens from Alaska to Zimbabwe, from the Andes to the Himalayas, people shared stories of how energy independence had transformed their lives. Schools with computers, clinics with refrigeration workshops with power tools, farms with irrigation pumps. As Michael watched these testimonials with Noah and Edward beside him, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A desperate bid at a county auction, a broken cabin in the woods, a hidden strongbox, a compass that pointed the way. "A penny for your thoughts," Edward said, noticing Michael's contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about value," Michael replied. "I spent my last $100 on that cabin, thinking I was buying shelter. But what we really found was purpose." Edward nodded, his eyes drifting to Noah, who was deep in conversation with Elena about implementation improvements for desert communities. "The boy has surpassed both of us," Edward observed quietly. "He sees applications and possibilities I never imagined." "He has a gift," Michael agreed. "But more importantly, he has your values. He understands that technology is only as good as the purpose it serves." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from Robert Chen. Security systems had detected unusual activity at the perimeter of their property, sophisticated surveillance drones with thermal imaging capabilities. "Military grade," Chen reported. "Someone's conducting very detailed reconnaissance of our facilities." The Foundation had faced numerous security challenges over the years: corporate espionage, attempted hacking, legal harassment. But this level of surveillance suggested a more serious threat. "Activate countermeasures," Michael instructed, "and implement Protocol Guardian, full information backup distributed, secure communication, emergency contact protocol." Protocol Guardian, developed after the GRT crisis, ensured that even if the Foundation's central facilities were compromised, their global network would continue functioning autonomously. Critical data was instantly mirrored to secure locations worldwide. Emergency alerts went out to partner organizations and allied government contacts. "We should evacuate non-essential personnel," Dr. Wilson suggested. Michael shook his head. "No unusual movements. Whatever they're planning, I don't want to signal that we're aware. Better to maintain normal operations while preparing defensively." The next morning brought clarity about the threat. A classified intelligence report, provided by a sympathetic contact in government, revealed that a coalition of interests, military contractors, traditional energy corporations, and nationalist political elements had formed an alliance called the Energy Sovereignty Initiative. Their stated objective was to reclaim critical energy infrastructure for national security. Their unstated objective was to roll back the democratization of energy that the IREAS technology had enabled, returning control to centralized authorities and corporate interests. They're planning coordinated action against multiple Foundation facilities, Chen explained, highlighting targets on a global map. "Not just us, but our implementation partners, training centers, and key installations." "This isn't just about technology anymore," Edward observed grimly. "It's about power in the most fundamental sense, who controls the resources that everyone needs." The Foundation faced its greatest challenge yet. A direct confrontation would be futile. Still, their adversaries had military resources, government connections, and vast financial backing. Legal defenses might delay, but not prevent action against their facilities. Even their distributed network could be vulnerable to a sufficiently coordinated attack. Noah, who had been listening silently to the threat assessment, suddenly spoke up. "You're all thinking defensively," he said, "but we need to think like Edward did with Protocol Omega. We don't win by protecting what we have. We win by giving away more of it faster." All eyes turned to the teenager, who continued with growing confidence. "The IRES technology has evolved since the first deployment. What if we release the complete technical specifications for the latest version not just to our existing partners, but to everyone. Universities, community cooperatives, independent engineers, even competing companies. Open source the entire system. Dr. Wilson looked shocked. That would mean, it would mean no one could control it, Noah finished. Not them, not us, not anyone. It would belong to humanity. Edward's face lit with understanding and pride. Protocol liberation, he said softly. The final step I always knew would come eventually. The decision wasn't made lightly. The Foundation team debated through the night, weighing risks and consequences. Some argued for more limited disclosure, others for legal countermeasures. But by morning, a consensus emerged around Noah's radical proposal, refined into a practical implementation plan. Over the next 72 hours, the Foundation prepared the most comprehensive technical disclosure in history, complete specifications for the IRES technology manufacturing guidelines, maintenance protocols, safety standards, and implementation methodologies. Everything needed to understand, build, and operate the system was compiled into formats accessible to different technical levels, from university researchers to village technicians. Edward insisted on writing the introduction himself, laboring over each word despite his advanced age. The technology contained in these documents was never meant to be owned, he wrote. It was created to serve humanity's need for clean, accessible energy. No corporation, government, or organization, including our own, should control who benefits from this knowledge. We release it freely to the world, asking only that it be used to empower rather than exploit, to liberate rather than control. As the Energy Sovereignty Initiative mobilized for its coordinated strike against Foundation facilities, Michael activated Protocol Liberation. The complete IRES documentation was simultaneously released through thousands of channels: academic servers, open source repositories, community networks, and media outlets. Within hours, the information had been downloaded and mirrored on servers across the globe, placing it permanently beyond any possibility of suppression. The ESI forces arrived at Foundation facilities to find them operating normally, with staff calmly explaining that everything they had come to seize was already freely available worldwide. The military-style operation collapsed into confusion as commanders received reports that the technology they sought to control was now public domain, rendering their mission obsolete before it began. In the weeks that followed, the liberation of the IRES technology catalyzed an explosion of innovation. Engineers in developing nations adapted the designs for local materials and conditions. University students created simplified versions that could be assembled from recycled components. Communities developed cooperative manufacturing systems to produce components locally. The technology evolved in ways the Foundation had never anticipated, becoming more diverse, more accessible, and more deeply integrated into local cultures and needs. Instead of a single standard system, 1,000 variations bloomed, each adapted to specific environmental conditions, resource availability, and community priorities. The Energy Sovereignty Initiative, having failed in its primary objective, attempted to regroup around a strategy of regulating and restricting the technology through legal means. But international public opinion had shifted decisively. Nations around the world, seeing the benefits of energy democratization, passed legislation protecting the right to implement community-based renewable systems. 6 months after Protocol Liberation, Michael and Noah stood once again on the ridge overlooking their property. The autumn colors had returned to the forest, marking 5 years since they had first discovered the cabin and begun their extraordinary journey. "Dad," Noah said, breaking a comfortable silence, "do you ever regret accepting Edward's offer, taking on all this responsibility?" Michael considered the question carefully. "There are days when I miss the simplicity of just being a mechanic. But no, I don't regret it. Your mother always said that when you're given an opportunity to make things better, you should take it." Noah nodded, looking out over the valley where lights were beginning to twinkle as evening approached, homes and businesses powered by the technology that had started in this forest. "I've been thinking about college," he said. "MIT has offered me early admission to their energy systems program." "That's incredible, Noah. You'd be the youngest student in their graduate division. But I'd have to leave all this," Noah gestured to the Foundation campus visible through the trees. "Leave you and Edward in the work we're doing." Michael placed his hands on his son's shoulders, turning him to meet his gaze directly. "Noah, listen to me. What we started here will continue, but your journey is just beginning. Edward gave us his legacy to carry forward. The greatest honor we can do him is to keep evolving it, keep improving it. You'll do that better with the education and connections MI can provide. As they made their way back to the cabin, they found Edward on the porch watching the sunset with peaceful contentment. At 92, his body had grown frail, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. "We were just talking about Noah's MIT acceptance," Michael told him. Edward's face lit with pleasure. "Excellent. They have remarkable facilities for energy research. And Professor Henderson is there. She's been doing fascinating work on neural interfaces for system optimization." "You're not disappointed that I'm leaving?" Noah asked hesitantly. Edward laughed softly. "My boy, did you think this forest was the end of your journey? It was only the beginning. The work we do isn't bound to this place. It lives wherever people use knowledge to help others." That evening, the three of them sat around the original cabin table, now restored and polished to a warm glow. On its surface lay Edward's first journal, the brass compass that had guided them to the markers and the technical drawings that had started everything. "I've been thinking," Edward said, his voice quiet but clear, "about what happens next. I won't be here forever, and the foundation will need to evolve beyond my vision." "Edward, you don't need to," Michael began, but the old inventor raised a hand to continue. "The next phase should focus on education. Not just technical training, but teaching the philosophy behind the technology, the values of accessibility, community control, and environmental stewardship. Noah's generation will take this work further than we ever imagined, but they'll need more than technical specifications. They'll need a compass." He pushed the brass instrument across the table toward Noah. "This guided you to the markers years ago. Let it remind you that technology without direction is just machinery. What matters is where you point it, what purpose it serves." Noah accepted the compass with solemn reverence, understanding the symbolic weight of the moment. "I promise to remember," he said simply. 5 years after Protocol Omega, the legacy of the broken cabin had spread far beyond its woodland clearing. What began as a desperate father's attempt to provide shelter for his son had evolved into a global movement that was transforming how humanity generated, distributed, and thought about energy. As darkness settled over the forest, the cabin glowed with warm light, not just with electricity, but with the deeper illumination of purpose fulfilled and possibilities unleashed. In a world often defined by competition for resources, they had created something different, a technology designed from its inception to be shared rather than hoarded, to elevate rather than exploit. The true value of their discovery had never been in patents or profits, but in the power to transform lives, starting with their own broken family and extending to communities around the world. The cabin that Michael had purchased for $100 had indeed contained treasure beyond imagination. But the greatest treasure had been the opportunity to build something meaningful together. A father, a son, and an inventor who believed that the best technology was that which brought light to the darkest places. As they looked toward the future, they knew that whatever challenges arose, the foundation they had built, not just of technology, but of values, would endure. For the legacy of the cabin wasn't confined to its walls or even to the revolutionary system that had been conceived within them. It lived in every community that generated its own power, in every child who studied under lights that their parents could now afford, in every clinic that kept medicines cold, in every workshop that created local jobs. And most of all, it lived in the realization that sometimes the greatest innovations aren't those that make someone wealthy or powerful, but those that help ordinary people build better lives with their own hands and hearts. The cabin's light shone out through the forest like a beacon, a reminder that even the most broken places and the most broken lives could be transformed with vision, perseverance, and the courage to build something new.